Chapter 1176. A tall, white-haired old man stood proudly at the entrance of the sacred palace, followed by two saints. It was obvious that this old man was a quasi-saint supreme sovereign from the myriad beast valley. Xiao Sheng and Bing Lian appeared in front of the old man in just a few moments. Xiao Sheng cupped his hands together and smiled. Xiao Sheng of the sacred palace, Bing Lian. The old man cupped his hands together and returned the greeting. I am Wu Xiao from the myriad beast valley. I hope that Supreme Sovereign Xiao Sheng and Supreme Sovereign Bing Lian will forgive me for coming uninvited. Haha, Supreme Sovereign Hu Xiao must be joking. Please come in, Xiao Sheng said with a hearty laugh. Tiger's Roar Grand Venerable was one of the three quasi-sage Grand Venerables of the myriad beast valley. His true form was a tyrant tiger. Among the beasts, the tyrant tiger tribe was considered very powerful. Of course, it couldn't be compared to the dragon tribe. After personally inviting Supreme Venerate Tiger Roar into the sacred region, the group went to the sacred hall. When Supreme Venerate Tiger Roar appeared in the sacred hall, the originally lively atmosphere was instantly extinguished. Everyone stared at Supreme Venerate Tiger Roar, Xiao Sheng, and Bing Lian in shock. It should be noted that those who could attend Xiao Chen's wedding today were basically the current saints of the North Star field. They were all giants of their own regions. Therefore, it was not surprising that some of them recognized the identity of Supreme Venerable Tiger Roar. Everyone was puzzled. What was Supreme Sovereign Hu Xiao doing here? Wasn't the myriad beast valley hostile to the sacred palace? Why would a quasi-saint Supreme Sovereign from the myriad beast valley appear here? Supreme Sovereign Tiger's Roar's appearance was unexpected. However, compared to them, Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun and the others were very calm. Immediately, Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun, Supreme Sovereign Yadun, and Supreme Sovereign Domineering Mountain stood up. Supreme Sovereign Domineering Mountain even looked at Supreme Sovereign Tiger's Roar with a smile and laughed loudly. Haha, why are you here, old man? Don't you understand the current situation? We are enemies. As quasi-saint supreme sovereigns of the North Star boundary, everyone naturally knew each other. Regardless of whether they were close, they definitely knew each other. Supreme Sovereign Hu Xiao laughed heartily when he heard Supreme Sovereign Domineering Peak's words. What? You want to spar with me today? Old man, you're still as unforgiving as ever. Naturally, we can't fight today. However, as for wine, we can have a drink. Hearing that, Grand Exalted Domineering Peak laughed heartily. He didn't ask everyone why Supreme Venerate Tiger Roar was here. Clearly, there were some things that these people weren't qualified to know. At Xiao Sheng's invitation, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar came to the table where Xiao Sheng and the other Supreme Sovereigns were seated. Although the myriad beast valley and the sacred palace and the other four great sects were enemies, no one made things difficult for Tiger Roar. Of course, the main problem was that Xiao Sheng was very friendly to Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar. After all, this was the sacred palace. If even the host didn't say anything, then Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun and the other guests naturally wouldn't force their way in. Everyone drank to their heart's content, especially Supreme Sovereign Domineering Peak and Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar. The two seemed to have a grudge against each other. In any case, ever since Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar sat down, Supreme Sovereign Domineering Peak had been drinking with him. Moreover, one of them was from the beast race, and the other was from the barbarian race. Both of them were boorish people. Therefore, when they drank, they were also speechless. In just a quarter of an hour, they had already drunk 7 or 8 jars of wine. Moreover, neither of them used their spiritual power to dissolve the alcohol. Xiao Chen was very clear about the purpose of Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar's visit, so he didn't care. Today wasn't the time to think about such things. The drinking continued until late at night. During this time, many people were drunk. It wasn't until the banquet was over and the guests were settled down to rest that Xiao Chen came to his cave residence. The courtyard that Xiao Chen originally lived in had been renovated and expanded. At this time, the entire courtyard was hung with red lanterns and light muslin, looking very festive. Just as Xiao Chen stepped into the courtyard, Qing Yao and Qing Luo, who had been waiting here, quickly came up to greet him. Smelling the alcohol on Xiao Chen's body, the two girls frowned and complained. "Young master, why did you drink so much wine?" The two girls had been with Xiao Chen for a long time. In addition, Xiao Chen was easygoing, so in front of Xiao Chen, the two girls spoke more casually. Ignoring the two girls' complaints, Xiao Chen asked, "Where are the ladies?" "Of course they're waiting for young master in the room," the two girls replied. Hearing this, Xiao Chen strode to the room and pushed the door open. Sure enough, he saw Qin Shiru and the other two girls sitting on the bed in red dresses. They should have been an old couple, but on such a day, with the arrival of Xiao Chen, the four girls couldn't help but feel nervous. Their hands unconsciously clenched tightly. With a smile on his face, Xiao Chen came to the bedside and lifted the red veils of the four girls one by one. Looking at the four beautiful girls, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "I say, ladies, we're an old couple. Why are you still so nervous?" Hearing this, Tian Yu's pretty face flushed red as she tenderly shouted, "Who is an old married couple with you?" Shameless. The more they tried to hide it, the more nervous the four girls were. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled. Then, Fei Mei and the other girls came in with the nuptial wine. Xiao Chen drank the nuptial wine with the four girls one after another. At this point, the ceremony was considered complete. After drinking the nuptial wine, Xiao Chen asked Fei Mei and the other girls to leave. Then, he looked at Qin Shiru and the other two girls with a smile. "Ladies, now that the ceremony is done, shouldn't we go to bed? Your husband drank a lot of wine, and my head is a little dizzy." Today was their wedding, and the four girls were dressed up very carefully. Each of them was incomparably charming. In addition, today was definitely a good opportunity to sleep under the same bed. In a good mood, Xiao Chen also joked. However, Gu Lingyao blushed and said, "Stinky hooligan. Haha, you're already my people. How can I be a hooligan? Ladies, come on, help your husband change." With a bright laugh, Xiao Chen directly pounced on the four girls. It was a silent night. On this night, Xiao Chen really enjoyed the blessings of having multiple partners. Of course, perhaps it was because it was their first time, so the four girls were a little shy. However, their wish to sleep under the same bed was finally fulfilled. And since there was a first time, there would definitely be a second time, a third time, and so on. It was a crazy night. The next morning, Xiao Chen woke up surrounded by the four women. Looking at the four women, who had different temperaments but were all devastatingly beautiful, a smile appeared on Xiao Chen's face as he murmured softly, "I, Xiao Chen, am so lucky to have the four of you. In this life, I will definitely not let you suffer any grievances." He secretly made a promise, and this promise would require Xiao Chen to fulfill it for the rest of his life. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 1177. After Xiao Chen woke up, the four women also opened their eyes one after another and looked at Xiao Chen. The four women blushed as they thought of last night's craziness. At this moment, the four women didn't know how to deal with it. In the end, Xiao Chen undoubtedly became the scapegoat. "Ro, I'm a pervert." The four women got up one after another, but they all muttered softly. Hearing the four women's mutterings, Xiao Chen smiled indifferently and called Qing Yao and Qing Luo over to help him wash up. Then, he helped Qin Shiru and the other three women dress up. After everything was done, Xiao Chen and the four women went to Shaoqing and Bai Riyue's residence. On the second day of the wedding, they naturally had to greet their parents. Qin Shiru and the other two women were already very used to this, but this was the first time Tian Yu greeted the two elders as the daughter-in-law of the Xiao family. However, the two elders were easygoing people. In addition, the four women were all very outstanding. The two elders were very happy that Xiao Chen could marry all four women at once. At the two elders' residence, the smile on Bai Riyue's face never disappeared as she looked at the four beautiful daughters-in-law in front of her. She kept saying that Xiao Chen was really lucky. Xiao Chen pursed his lips in response to Bai Riyue's words. He thought to himself, "What do you mean by lucky? This originally belonged to me." Bai Rui was very happy to be accompanied by the four women. While everyone was chatting, Fei Mei quickly walked to Xiao Chen's side and said, Young master, Patriarch Xiao Shang wants you to go to his cave residence. Xiao Shang invited him. Hearing this, Xiao Qin nodded and then looked at Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing. Father, mother, the patriarch is looking for me. I'll go. Go. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, Bai Ruyue, who was chatting enthusiastically with Qin Shu and the other 3 women, didn't even look at him. She even waved her hand impatiently, indicating for Xiao Chun to go quickly. Seeing Bai Ruyue's appearance, Xiao Chun smiled helplessly. What was this? She forgot her son after having a daughter-in-law. However, Xiao Chun didn't say anything and quickly walked out of the courtyard. If he guessed correctly, Xiao Shang had called him because of the myriad beast valley. After all, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar had personally come yesterday. Xiao Qin definitely didn't believe that he was really here to congratulate him on his wedding. Needless to say, Xiao Qin also knew why Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar had come. It was naturally for Long Qing. On the way to Xiao Shang's cave residence, Xiao Chun had already been informed beforehand. Therefore, when he arrived, he wasn't stopped and directly entered the cave residence. Under the guidance of a sacred palace Saint Venerate, Xiao Chun saw Xiao Shang and Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar in a bamboo garden. Today, only Xiao Chun and Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar were present. Tiger Roar nodded with a smile when he saw Xiao Chun, while Xiao Shang said with a smile, "You can't blame me for calling you here on the second day of the wedding, right?" Ancestor must be joking. Xiao Chun bowed, then turned and bowed to Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar. After Xiao Chun bowed, Xiao Shang pointed to the seat beside him and said, "Sit down." After taking a seat, Xiao Shang looked at Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar and said, "I already understand why Brother Tiger Roar has come. Since the Myriad Beast Valley has no intention of becoming enemies with the Sacred Palace, the Sacred Palace is naturally willing to be on good terms with the Myriad Beast Valley." Before Xiao Qin arrived, Xiao Shang and Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar had already chatted for a while. According to Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar, he had come this time mainly to convey goodwill. Although the Myriad Beast Valley had formed an alliance with the Night Ghost Pavilion and logically could be regarded as a hostile force of the Sacred Palace, the Myriad Beast Valley did not want to become enemies with the Sacred Palace. Therefore, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar had personally come on Xiao Qin's wedding to show his determination to be on good terms with the Sacred Palace. Xiao Shang naturally did not believe Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar's words. To put it bluntly, the true purpose of Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar's visit this time was clearly because of Long Qing. However, since Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar did not take the initiative to speak, Xiao Shang naturally pretended not to know and did not mention this matter at all. In front of Xiao Chun, the two of them went back and forth. In the end, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar could not bear it any longer. He could also see that Xiao Shang was completely playing Tai Chi with him. Xiao Shang clearly guessed the true purpose of his visit, but still refused to say, making Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar feel rather helpless. In the end, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar took the initiative to mention it. Brother Xiao Shang, to tell you the truth, in addition to expressing the goodwill of the Myriad Beast Valley towards the Sacred Palace, there is actually another matter. "Oh, what is it, Brother Tiger Roar?" Xiao Shang pretended to be puzzled. Xiao Shang was definitely an expert at pretending to be confused. Seeing this, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar did not intend to beat around the bush and immediately spoke bluntly. "To tell you the truth, I'm mainly here for Long Qing. I heard that Long Qing is a pure-blooded dragon. Brother Xiao Shang should also know the status of the dragon race and our beast race. So, I'm also here to see Long Qing." He had come for Long Qing. Xiao Shang naturally could not feign ignorance. However, Xiao Shang had clearly come up with a plan to deal with this. His expression changed when he heard that, and a sliver of awkwardness appeared on his face. "In that case, does Brother Tiger Roar want to see Long Qing? Allow me to ask, what does Brother Tiger Roar and the Myriad Beast Valley want? Could it be that you want Long Qing to join your Myriad Beast Valley?" The Myriad Beast Valley did intend to let Long Qing join them, but they naturally could not say this to Xiao Shang. Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar smiled. Brother Xiao Sheng must be joking. Long Qing is the sacred palace's holy maiden, so I naturally would not do such a thing. However, as a member of the beast race, I also want to see Long Qing with my own eyes after learning of the existence of a pure-blooded dragon race. Xiao Sheng showed a relieved expression, refusing to admit that the myriad Beast Valley wanted to poach Long Qing. That's good. Brother Tiger Roar, you may not know this, but Long Qing is the holy maiden of our sacred palace and is Xiao Chen's second sister. The two of them have a very deep relationship. If the myriad Beast Valley wants to poach Long Qing, then I will be in a difficult position. Fortunately, Brother Tiger Roar is a righteous man, so I can rest assured. Please wait a moment. I will ask someone to invite Long Qing over. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Hu Zhao's expression changed slightly, and the corners of his mouth twitched unconsciously. Xiao Sheng's words seemed sincere, but in fact, they had blocked all of Hu Zhao's paths. With these words, how could Hu Zhao ask Long Qing to join the myriad Beast Valley? However, when he heard that Xiao Sheng had sent someone to invite Long Qing, Hu Zhao restrained his emotions and decided to meet her first. As for other matters, he could put them aside. He had not even seen Long Qing's face, so it was too early to say anything. Therefore, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar quickly regained his composure and patiently waited for Long Qing's arrival. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 1178. Hu Zhao's purpose in coming to the sacred palace was very simple. He was here for Long Qing. As the three waited with their own thoughts, Long Qing soon arrived in front of them. He first glanced at Xiao Chen, and Xiao Chen also shot a glance at Long Qing. Long Qing then cupped his hands towards Xiao Sheng and Hu Zhao. Disciple Long Qing greets ancestor and supreme sovereign Hu Zhao. His tone wasn't very respectful, but Xiao Sheng and Hu Zhao clearly didn't care. Hu Zhao especially stared at Long Qing the moment Long Qing appeared. In fact, after reaching Hu Zhao's level, he no longer coveted Long Qing's bloodline power. After all, Hu Zhao's bloodline power wasn't low, and he was also a quasi-saint supreme sovereign. Even if he devoured Long Qing's bloodline power, it wouldn't be of much use. Therefore, Hu Zhao's attitude towards Long Qing was very clear. He didn't value Long Qing, but Long Qing's relationship with the pure-blood dragon race. Among the beast races, the dragon race was famous for being protective of their own. Since Long Qing was a pure-blood dragon, even if she had no relationship with the pure-blood dragon race before, the dragon race would definitely send someone to Long Qing once they learned of her existence. This was what Supreme Sovereign Hu Zhao valued. He wanted to use Long Qing to establish a relationship with the dragon race. Once the myriad Beast Valley gained the protection of the dragon race, the entire North Star boundary would most likely revere the myriad Beast Valley. Supreme Sovereign Tiger's Roar stared at Long Qing. After a long while, he said, "Can you show me the power of your bloodline?" He wanted Long Qing to show her bloodline power. Long Qing glanced at Xiao Sheng. Seeing this, Xiao Sheng chuckled. "I'll show it to Supreme Sovereign Hu Zhao. It's fine." Now that Long Qing's identity had been exposed, there was naturally no need to continue hiding it. Moreover, the sacred palace was now confident in facing the myriad Beast Valley. They weren't afraid that the myriad Beast Valley would do anything and were fully capable of protecting Long Qing. Upon hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Long Qing nodded slightly. Then, a pure dragon race pressure soared into the sky from her body. As this pressure appeared, Supreme Sovereign Hu Zhao couldn't help but abruptly stand up. Although he already knew Long Qing's identity, he couldn't help feeling the pure dragon race pressure from Long Qing's body. Dragon race. Pure-blooded dragon race. It really is a pure-blooded dragon race. Although this was the first time he had seen a pure-blooded dragon race, he was certain that Long Qing was definitely a pure-blooded dragon race. This was because the first chosen of the myriad Beast Valley was a flood dragon and also had the aura of a dragon race. However, compared to Long Qing, the difference between the two was like the difference between heaven and earth. This was the aura that truly belonged to the dragon race. If a flood dragon, like the first chosen of the Myriad Beast Valley, were to face Long Qing, just the suppression of his bloodline alone would be enough to suppress him to only 30% of his strength. The dragon race's bloodline power basically had a suppressive effect on all beast races. However, compared to other races, the suppression on the flood dragons and other branches of the dragon race was even more terrifying. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the first chosen of the Myriad Beast Valley wouldn't even have the ability to attack in front of Long Qing. This was the terror of the pure-blooded dragon race. Supreme Venerate Tiger's roar stared at Long Qing excitedly until Long Qing withdrew his pressure. Only then did Supreme Venerate Tiger's roar regain his senses. Taking a deep breath, Supreme Venerable Tiger Roar returned to his seat and turned to look at Xiao Xingdao. Brother Xiao Sheng, Long Qing is a pure-blooded dragon race. She is too important to our Myriad Beast Valley. I won't hide it from you. Brother Xiao Sheng, please state your conditions. After personally confirming Long Qing's identity, Tiger Roar no longer hid anything and spoke bluntly. The Myriad Beast Valley indeed valued Long Qing very much and wanted Long Qing to join the Myriad Beast Valley. Upon hearing Tiger Roar's words, Xiao Sheng smiled faintly. Brother Tiger Roar must be joking. Didn't we already say that Long Qing is the Sacred Palace's holy maiden? Naturally, she can't join the Myriad Beast Valley. He directly refused. Tiger Roar still didn't give up. Brother Xiao Sheng, why don't you consider it? We can negotiate any conditions. Our Myriad Beast Valley can give the Sacred Palace a secret territory. What do you think? Brother Xiao Sheng should be very clear that what the Sacred Palace currently lacks is a foundation. If we have a secret territory, the Sacred Palace will rise to another level in a very short period of time. Not hesitating to use a heritage mystic realm to exchange for Long Qing, one had to admit that the Myriad Beast Valley was indeed very generous. It should be said that the Myriad Beast Valley only had 2 secret territories in their hands, and they were willing to give one to the Sacred Palace for Long Qing. Xiaoxing shook his head and refused the Myriad Beast Valley's conditions without the slightest hesitation. Brother Tiger Roar, there's no need to mention this matter again. Our Sacred Palace does lack a foundation, but we won't exchange it for our holy maiden, so there's nothing to discuss. Xiao Sheng refused to exchange a secret territory for Long Qing. Tiger Roar's eyes flashed with a trace of loneliness, but at this moment, after a pause, Xiao Sheng continued. However, I also know why the Myriad Beast Valley values Long Qing so much. Long Qing can't join the Myriad Beast Valley, but we can make a deal. If Long Qing contacts the Dragon Clan in the future, Long Qing can help introduce the Myriad Beast Valley to the Dragon Clan. What do you think? It was impossible for Long Qing to join the Myriad Beast Valley, but the 2 sides could cooperate. Tiger Roar frowned slightly when he heard Xiao Sheng's words, but he did not immediately agree. Indeed, the Myriad Beast Valley valued Long Qing because of Long Qing's identity, and the cooperation that Xiaoxing mentioned was completely possible, but he did not know how the Sacred Palace would cooperate. Looking at Xiao Sheng, Tiger Roar asked, how does Brother Xiao Sheng intend to cooperate? It's very simple. The Myriad Beast Valley will ally with our Sacred Palace to deal with the Night Ghost Pavilion together. After defeating the Night Ghost Pavilion, the Myriad Beast Valley will not take any benefits, and everything will belong to the Sacred Palace. Xiao Sheng bluntly stated his conditions. These conditions were very harsh. First, the Myriad Beast Valley would have to betray the Night Ghost Pavilion, then help the Sacred Palace deal with the Night Ghost Pavilion for free. After the matter was over, the Myriad Beast Valley would not take any benefits, and everything would belong to the Sacred Palace. Under normal circumstances, Tiger's Roar would have rejected such harsh conditions without hesitation. However, he hesitated at this time. He did not want to agree, but Long Qing was here. If he did not agree, what would the Myriad Beast Valley do? Should he use force? But the current Sacred Palace was not afraid of the Myriad Beast Valley. Moreover, the Liwang sect, Supreme Deity sect, and Ninth Heaven were also on the side. It was unrealistic to try to snatch Long Qing away by force. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 1179. Using force was the last resort. Moreover, if the myriad Beast Valley wanted to use force, the Supreme Divine Sect, Li Wang's sect, and 9 heavens would not sit idly by. There was no doubt about this. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar did not want to take this step. However, agreeing to the Sacred Palace's conditions was very difficult for Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar. He fell into silence, but Xiao Sheng smiled faintly and said, "Brother Tiger Roar, there's no need to be so difficult. Brother Hu Xiao, there's nothing to worry about. According to what you said before, the Myriad Beast Valley is willing to give up a secret realm to the Sacred Palace. Now that we're working together, the Myriad Beast Valley doesn't have to pay anything. Moreover, if the Myriad Beast Valley agrees, the Night Ghost Pavilion will undoubtedly lose. Even the Evil Sky Hall won't be able to reverse the situation. Is there a need to consider this?" Xiao Sheng's words moved Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar. Indeed, according to what Xiao Sheng said, since the Myriad Beast Valley was willing to exchange a secret domain for the Longqing, there should be no problem with cooperating with the Sacred Palace. Moreover, without the Longevity Palace, the Night Ghost Pavilion and Evil Sky Hall would not be able to withstand the joint attack of the Sacred Palace, Heavenly Saint Sect, Li Wang's sect, 9 heavens, and the Myriad Beast Valley. After a moment of silence, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar finally said, "Brother Xiao Sheng, can you give me some time? After all, this is an important matter. I need to discuss it with the other 2 old fellows." The Myriad Beast Valley also had 3 Quasi-Saint Supreme Sovereigns, and Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar obviously could not make the decision alone. He needed to ask the other 2 for their opinion. Xiao Sheng smiled and said, "Of course. In that case, Brother Tiger Roar can stay in the Sacred Palace for a few more days. If there's anything you need, just instruct your subordinates. Then I'll leave it to you, Brother Xiao Sheng." Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar nodded. Tiger's Roar didn't reply immediately. After chatting for a bit, Tiger's Roar tactfully left. He needed to send a message back to the Myriad Beast Valley and ask the other 2 old fellows for their opinion. After Supreme Venerable Tiger Roar left, Xiao Sheng, Xiao Chun, and Long Qing sat together and looked at Xiao Chen. Xiao Sheng chuckled and said, "Chunner, what do you think are the chances of the Myriad Beast Valley agreeing?" "At least 80%, Xiao Chun said softly. "Is it that high?" Xiao Sheng asked. "The Valley of Beasts can't refuse Second Sister's presence. Moreover, the Valley of Beasts has nothing to lose by cooperating with the Sacred Palace. It may seem like they are working for nothing, but they have gained an opportunity to interact with the Dragon Clan. For the Valley of Beasts, this is comparable to countless resources." Xiao Chen smiled. Xiao Chan was very confident in the Valley of Beast choice. Xiao Sheng smiled and didn't say anything else. Everything that needed to be said had been said. All that was left was to wait for the Valley of Beasts decision. While the Sacred Palace began to rope in the Valley of Beasts, the Demonic Sky Hall, as a quasi-saint sect of the Devil race, was naturally not to be underestimated. The Demonic Sky Hall and the Night Ghost Pavilion were currently in alliance. Of course, the Valley of Beasts was also included for the time being. However, in a cave dwelling in the Demonic Sky Hall, a young man from the Devil race said helplessly to someone in front of him, "I don't know what the big clans are thinking. Why would they ally with the Night Ghost Pavilion?" The young man sighed helplessly. Upon hearing this, the person beside him smiled and said, "Junior brother, we can't change the Supreme Sovereign's decision. Since we have already formed an alliance, there's no need to dwell on the past." The 2 young men from the Devil race were wearing the robes of the Demonic Sky Hall's chosen. Clearly, they were both chosen of the Demonic Sky Hall. The young man who was called Junior Brother was someone Xiao Chan was familiar with. He was Sha Mo, who was both Xiao Chen's enemy and friend in the Heavenly River Continent. Sha Mo had joined the Demonic Sky Hall and was already a chosen of the Demonic Sky Hall. Among the 6 chosen of the Demonic Sky Hall, Sha Mo was ranked 5th. After leaving the Northern Devil Continent, Sha Mo and a group of Devil Race members began to gather strength in the Northern Star World. By chance, he had joined the Demonic Sky Hall. After joining the Demonic Sky Palace, Sha Mo's talent was fully unleashed. Previously, in the Northern Devil Continent, Sha Mo had no contact with the outside world. It was as though he was bound. However, in the Demonic Sky Palace, Sha Mo was like a fish in water. His talent shocked many disciples. Because of Sha Mo's terrifying talent, he had quickly attracted the attention of one of the great venerates of the Demonic Sky Palace. With the help of a large number of resources, Sha Mo had become the fifth holy son of the Demonic Sky Palace in just a few years. Sha Mo had already become a chosen of the Demonic Sky Hall. However, when he heard that the Demonic Sky Hall had formed an alliance with the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Myriad Beast Valley, he was resolutely against it. The reason was simple. He wanted to become enemies with the Sacred Palace. Knowing that Shao Chun was the first chosen of the Sacred Palace, Sha Mo didn't want the Demonic Sky Hall to become enemies with the Sacred Palace. However, even as a chosen, Sha Mo couldn't change the Supreme Sovereign's decision. After chatting with the young man in front of him for a long time, Sha Mo stood in the courtyard after the young man left. He looked at the distant horizon and sighed softly. "Brother Shao Chun, are we destined to be enemies? The Heavenly River Continent is like that, and now the Northern Star Boundary is like that as well." Everything seemed to be destined. Sha Mo and Shao Chun were enemies again. Shao Chun didn't know that Sha Mo was in the Demonic Sky Hall. He had been in the Sacred Palace for the past few days. He was either cultivating or spending time with the four women. Shao Chun even took time out to take Tian Yu to play around the Heavenly Chun Continent. Shao Chun and the four women were very happy as newlyweds. Under this happy atmosphere, 5 days quickly passed. On this day, there was finally news from Supreme Sovereign Hu Shao. Shao Sheng specially ordered someone to invite Shao Chun and Long Qing. Shao Chun didn't refuse and soon arrived at Shao Sheng's cave dwelling with Long Qing. They strode into the cave dwelling and saw Shao Sheng and Supreme Sovereign Hu Shao in the same courtyard as a few days ago. Shao Sheng smiled when he saw the two walking over. The Thousand Beast Valley has decided to cooperate with the Sacred Palace to deal with the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Demonic Sky Hall. The Thousand Beast Valley had finally made a decision. Shao Qin didn't think much of it. After all, the Thousand Beast Valley had no reason to refuse. Rather than allying with the Night Ghost Pavilion, the Thousand Beast Valley would gain more benefits by allying with the Sacred Palace. However, even though they had agreed, the Valley of Beasts had a condition. After pausing for a moment, Shao Sheng continued, "If we want to form an alliance, the Valley of Beasts also hopes that Long Qing can make a trip to the Valley of Beasts. Of course, it's nothing special. We just want the people of the Valley of Beasts to see Long Qing with their own eyes and dispel their worries. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." In a chapter. Chapter 1180. It wasn't strange that the Myriad Beast Valley wanted Long Qing to go in person. After all, the only one who had seen Long Qing was Supreme Sovereign Tiger's Roar, so it was understandable that the other two Supreme Sovereigns wanted to see her in person. However, since she was going, there were some things that needed to be made clear. Shao Qin winked at Shao Sheng. Shao Sheng naturally understood Shao Qin's meaning and turned to Supreme Sovereign Tiger's Roar with a smile. There's naturally no problem with letting Long Qing go to the Myriad Beast Valley, but Brother Tiger's Roar, there are some things that need to be said first. If Long Qing goes to the Myriad Beast Valley, the Myriad Beast Valley won't forcibly detain her, right? What are you talking about, Brother Shao Sheng? My Myriad Beast Valley and the Sacred Palace are now allies. How can we do such a thing? Supreme Sovereign Tiger's Roar immediately said with a displeased expression. No one could guarantee that the Myriad Beast Valley wouldn't forcibly detain Long Qing. Shao Sheng smiled. Then let's set a time limit. Long Qing will go to the Myriad Beast Valley and will only stay for 3 days at most. After 3 days, Long Qing will have to leave. Is that okay with you, Brother Tiger's Roar? Only stay for 3 days in the Myriad Beast Valley? Supreme Sovereign Tiger's Roar hesitated, but he didn't have a good excuse. Yes, The reason the Myriad Beast Valley wanted Longqing to go in person was to let the other two supreme sovereigns see Longqing. As such, 3 days was more than enough. There was no reason to refute Xiaosheng's words. After pondering for a moment, Supreme Sovereign Tiger's roar finally nodded. All right, we'll do as Brother Xiaosheng says. 3 days it is. After agreeing to Xiaosheng's request, the group agreed to leave the next day. Supreme Sovereign Tiger's roar directly left, while Xiao Chun, Xiao Sheng, and Longqing sat together. Xiao Chun spoke at this time. Ancestor, I'm afraid we still need to make some preparations. We can't completely trust the Myriad Beast Valley. Although the Myriad Beast Valley had agreed to the alliance, who knew if this was a conspiracy? If the Myriad Beast Valley was pretending to be an alliance on the surface, but secretly had their eyes on Longqing and was preparing to forcibly detain Longqing in the Myriad Beast Valley, then it would be troublesome. They had to be prepared. After hearing Zhao's words, Xiao asked. He whispered to Xiao Chun. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, a smile appeared on Xiao Sheng's face as he whispered in Xiao Sheng's ear. Then it'll be foolproof. They couldn't completely trust the Myriad Beast Valley, but Xiao Chun had also thought of a foolproof plan. Xiao Chen's method was very much in agreement with Xiao Sheng. A day passed quickly. Early in the morning of the second day, a small starship was already anchored in the main square of the sacred palace. This starship belonged to the Myriad Beast Valley. Everyone was ready to set off. Supreme Sovereign Tiger's roar and 2 other saints from a Myriad Beast Valley were already waiting. They didn't have to wait long. Soon, the 3 siblings Longqing, Xiao Chun, and Chunling arrived at the main square. At the same time, the 4 quasi-saint supreme sovereigns, including Xiao Sheng, Supreme Sovereign Tianyun, Supreme Sovereign Adon, and Supreme Sovereign Hegemen Mountain, also appeared. Seeing Xiao Sheng, Tianyun, and the other 3 supreme sovereigns, a trace of doubt flashed across Supreme Sovereign Tiger's face, but he still greeted them warmly on the surface. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Xiao Sheng smiled and said, "Ha, Brother Tiger's roar, since we're going to the Myriad Beast Valley today, I've already told Tianyun and the others. Let's go together. We can also discuss the alliance. Not only Longqing and her siblings, but also Xiao Sheng, Supreme Sovereign Tianyun, Supreme Sovereign Adon, and Supreme Sovereign Hegemen Mountain." Hearing this, Supreme Sovereign Tiger's roar was slightly taken aback. Then, his expression became a little complicated. Xiao Sheng called along Supreme Venerate Tianyun and the other 2. Clearly, this was to guard against any unusual movements from the Myriad Beast Valley. With 4 quasi-sages heading to the Myriad Beast Valley at the same time, the Myriad Beast Valley would definitely not dare to act rashly, even if they had any ulterior motives. Not to mention whether the Myriad Beast Valley had the ability to deal with Xiao Sheng and the other 3. Even if they did, if they attacked Xiao Sheng and the other 3 at the same time, it would be tantamount to offending the 4 quasi-saint sections. At that time, the Myriad Beast Valley would really be in trouble. This was also Xiao Chen's plan. He wanted Xiao Sheng to bring Supreme Sovereign Tianyun and the other 2 to the Myriad Beast Valley on the surface to discuss the alliance. But in reality, it was to take revenge on Longqing and intimidate the Myriad Beast Valley. The reason was very good, and at the same time, the Myriad Beast Valley had no reason to refuse. As a result, Supreme Sovereign Tiger's roar could only suffer in silence. After a moment of helplessness, Supreme Sovereign Tiger's roar reluctantly nodded and said, "That's good. Shall we set off?" The matter of the sacred palace had already been settled yesterday. Hearing this, the 4 supreme sovereigns, including Xiao Chun, Longqing, Chunling, and Xiao Sheng, as well as the 2 sacred palace saint sovereigns, stepped into the starry sky together and soon flew out of the heavenly Qin continent. The starship quickly streaked across the starry sky. Inside the ship, Supreme Sovereign Tiger's roar and the other 3 sat together. To be honest, Supreme Sovereign Tiger's roar was not in a good mood at this moment, but he couldn't show it. Xiao Sheng had asked Supreme Venerate Tianyun and the other 2 to go to the Myriad Beast Valley together. Obviously, He was guarding against the Myriad Beast Valley. Given the current situation, it was impossible for the Myriad Beast Valley to do anything to Longqing. Of course, only the Supreme Sovereigns knew whether the Myriad Beast Valley had such intentions. They weren't with Xiao Sheng and the other quasi-saint Supreme Sovereigns. At this moment, Xiao Chun and his siblings were sitting in a circle in the room, drinking and chatting as usual. Looking at Chunling, Xiao Chun said with a smile, "Big brother, you said that you and second sister's hometown isn't in the North Star boundary. Are there any other star boundaries outside the North Star boundary?" Chunling and Longqing's hometown wasn't in the North Star boundary, but Chunling had always kept his mouth shut about this. Now that Xiao Chun asked again, Chunling finally opened his mouth to speak. "Of course there are, but now isn't the time to ask these questions. You'll understand in the future. Besides, I think it's about time." "It's about time." Xiao Chun was puzzled, but no matter how Xiao Chun asked, Chunling wouldn't answer. In the end, Xiao Chun had no choice but to give up. Chunling knew a lot of things, but he seemed to be very afraid of them. He wouldn't tell Xiao Chun and Longqing at all. He just said that they would know when the time came. There were other star boundaries outside the North Star boundary, but what was strange was that in this case, why was there no record of this at all in the North Star boundary? Logically speaking, in the history of the North Star boundary, not to mention quasi-saints and great venerables, there had even been more than one great sage. In that case, could it be that those great sages and quasi-saints had never left the North Star boundary? Why were there no records of the world outside the North Star boundary? Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. Into this chapter. Chapter 1181. Xiao Chun had some doubts about the matters outside the North Star boundary, but these matters were still too far away for Xiao Chun. Just the vastness of the North Star boundary alone was enough for Xiao Chun to travel for many years. Even though he already knew the vastness of the North Star realm, the places that Xiao Chun had visited over the years were just the tip of the iceberg for the North Star realm. There were many places in the North Star realm that Xiao Chun had yet to visit, such as the destination of this trip, the Valley of Beasts. Therefore, it was not the time to think about these questions. Perhaps Chunling was also considering this. Xiao Chun stopped discussing these matters. As for whether they would be in danger on this trip to the Myriad Beast Valley, he was not worried. What a joke! With 4 quasi-saint great sovereigns traveling together, this was already safe enough. As long as the Myriad Beast Valley was not stupid, they would definitely not do anything out of line. The starship flew quickly in the starry sky. Because there was no transboundary transmission array between the Sacred Palace and the Myriad Beast Valley, they could only rely on the starship to travel, which was relatively time-consuming. After 7 days, the group arrived at the 100 Beast Continent where the Myriad Beast Valley was located. This was a huge continent that was not inferior to the Taishan continent where the Supreme Divine Sect was located. They flew all the way to the Myriad Beast Valley. There was a huge valley that was almost like a plain inside. This was where the Myriad Beast Valley sect was located. The starship slowly landed and Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar and the other quasi-saint Great Sovereign strode out, followed by Xiao Chun, Longqing, Chunling, and 2 other Sacred Palace Great Sovereigns. Everyone disembarked from the starship one after another. The Myriad Beast Valley had already prepared accommodations for everyone in advance. Originally, Xiao Chun and the other 2 did not live together with Xiao Sheng and the others, but at Xiao Sheng's request, everyone ended up living in the same courtyard. Living with Xiao Sheng, Grand Venerable Tian Yun, and the others would naturally be safer. In the face of Xiao Sheng's request, Grand Venerable Tiger Roar didn't refuse. He must have thought it through. If Xiao Sheng was already like this, what else could the Myriad Beast Valley do? After everyone settled down, Tiger Roar took his leave, stating that he would personally invite Xiao Sheng and the others to the main hall of the Myriad Beast Valley to discuss the alliance with the other 2 Myriad Beast Valley Great Sovereigns. Today, he would let Xiao Sheng and the others have a good rest. Xiao Sheng naturally wouldn't refuse. He personally saw Supreme Sovereign Hu Xiao off. Then, the group arrived at the front hall and took a seat. Supreme Sovereign Aten said with a smile, "Brother Xiao Sheng, The three of us have helped you so much this time. You must treat us to a good meal in the future. Adon and the other two were simply here to help. Discussing the alliance was pure nonsense. Hearing Grand Monarch Adon's words, Xiaosheng smiled faintly and said, "Of course, huh?" Now that the Myriad Beast Valley didn't dare to play any tricks, the next step was to go through the motions and confirm that the Myriad Beast Valley was truly in an alliance. Then, they could really make a move against the Night Ghost Pavilion. While Xiaosheng and the others were talking, Supreme Venerate Tiger Roar and two other Quasi-Saint Supreme Venerates of the Myriad Beast Valley were sitting together in a cave dwelling deep within the Myriad Beast Valley. Looking at the two, Tiger Roar said helplessly, "The Sacred Palace is clearly on guard against us. Grand Venerable Tian Yun and the other two obviously came to intimidate us. They are afraid that we will forcibly detain Long Qing in the Myriad Beast Valley. That's normal. After all, the Myriad Beast Valley only said that they were in an alliance. Naturally, the Sacred Palace doesn't believe them. All right, since that's the case, let's form an alliance with the Sacred Palace. Based on the current situation, the Night Ghost Pavilion's fate is sealed." Hearing Tiger Roar's words, one of the great sovereigns spoke up. This person was the #1 great sovereign of the Myriad Beast Valley. His cultivation had reached the great perfection of the Quasi-Saint realm, so his words carried a lot of weight. At this point, the alliance between the Myriad Beast Valley and the Sacred Palace could be said to be the best choice. After all, the Night Ghost Pavilion couldn't support the Myriad Beast Valley alone. Moreover, the Night Ghost Pavilion couldn't give the Myriad Beast Valley what they wanted. If they formed an alliance with the Sacred Palace, the Myriad Beast Valley might be able to form a relationship with the dragon race in the future. After all, any alliance had its own benefits. Since the Night Ghost Pavilion couldn't give the Myriad Beast Valley what they wanted, but the Sacred Palace could, there was naturally no reason to hesitate. Having already decided on the alliance with the Myriad Beast Valley, the last great sovereign of the Myriad Beast Valley said, "That's the only way. But that brat Jiao Yang, shouldn't we spoil him for a few days? I'm afraid that he will cause trouble for Long Qing. It's not like you don't know that brat's character." Jiao Yang was the #1 holy son of the Myriad Beast Valley. After hearing that the third holy maiden of the Sacred Palace, Long Qing, was a pure-blooded dragon, Jiao Yang declared that he wanted to marry Long Qing. Originally, Jiao Yang had wanted to personally go to the Sacred Palace, but the three great sovereigns, who knew Jiao Yang's temperament, had directly refused. Now that Long Qing had taken the initiative to come to the Sacred Palace, with Jiao Yang's character, he definitely wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Jiao Yang is too arrogant. Although his bloodline is close to that of a pure-blooded dragon, it's impossible for him to marry a pure-blooded dragon. Moreover, Long Qing has two brothers, Chun Ling and Xiao Chun. Both of them aren't easy to deal with. If Jiao Yang comes to visit, I'm afraid he'll cause trouble. Hearing this, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar said helplessly, "Jiao Yang is too arrogant. Although his bloodline is close to that of a pure-blooded dragon, it's impossible for him to marry a pure-blooded dragon." Jiao Yang was arrogant and felt that only pure-blooded dragons like Long Qing were worthy of him. Unfortunately, in the eyes of pure-blooded dragons, even though Jiao Yang was also part of the dragon race, he was nothing. Hearing the two great sovereigns' words, the first great sovereign, who had been silent all this time, said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about him. This kid should be taught a lesson. Otherwise, he will always think that no one in the world can deal with him. Let him be. Moreover, if we don't intervene in the matters of the younger generation, Xiaosheng and the others won't intervene. That's fine. Let's focus on the alliance." There was no need to care about Jiao Yang. Supreme Venerate Tiger Roar and Supreme Venerate nodded. While the three great exalts were talking about Jiao Yang, in Jiao Yang's cave, a handsome young man wearing the robes of the Myriad Beast Valley's holy son sat in the courtyard and asked the disciple of the Myriad Beast Valley in an indifferent tone. He had a haughty look on his face. "Has Long Qing arrived?" "Yes, holy son. However, Long Qing lives with the great sovereigns of the Sacred Palace. If we go there, won't it be a little?" The disciple respectfully replied. He had already investigated the matter, but the disciple was a little worried. If Jiao Yang directly visited Long Qing, wouldn't it offend Xiao Sheng and the other great sovereigns? Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 1182. Jiao Yang's true form was a flood dragon, and the Flood Dragon clan was a branch of the Dragon clan. Their bloodline wasn't pure, but even so, the Flood Dragon clan was one of the most famous clans in the Beast clan. Perhaps it was because of his identity that Jiao Yang had been extremely arrogant since he was young. He didn't place anyone in his eyes and always believed that his bloodline was the noblest among the Beast clans. Of course, this was normal. After all, there was no true dragon clan in the North Star world. As such, the Flood Dragon clan was naturally one of the top clans in the North Star world. He had always been proud of his bloodline. Therefore, when he heard that Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon, Jiao Yang swore that he would definitely pursue Long Qing. In his opinion, only a pure-blooded dragon like Long Qing was worthy of being his wife. It was a very laughable thought. Jiao Yang only felt that Long Qing was worthy of being his wife, but he had never thought about whether he was worthy of Long Qing. It was true that the Flood Dragon clan was very powerful, but in front of the Dragon clan, the Flood Dragon clan was more like a servant. It was because of the Dragon clan's charity that the Flood Dragon clan possessed the Dragon clan's bloodline power. It was a joke that such a clan, which was basically a slave clan, wanted to marry a pure-blooded dragon. If there were any other pure-blooded dragons in the North Star world, Jiao Yang would have been killed long ago. What a joke. A mere flood dragon dared to touch a pure-blooded dragon? Wasn't he just courting death? Jiao Yang couldn't forget about Long Qing. That evening, he came to Long Qing's residence uninvited. Even when a sacred palace Saint Venerate stopped him outside the courtyard, Jiao Yang didn't restrain his temper at all. I'm looking for Long Qing. Jiao Yang didn't show the slightest respect to a sacred palace Saint Venerate. The sacred palace Saint Venerate's expression darkened. Sorry, Long Qing is not seeing anyone. The holy Venerate was already displeased in his heart, but he did not do anything out of line. He spoke indifferently and was about to close the door. Jiao Yang snorted coldly. You're courting death. With that, Jiao Yang struck out with his palm and attacked the sacred palace's sacred Venerate without any warning. Even though Jiao Yang was the number one chosen of the Thousand Beast Valley, his lack of manners and arrogance had naturally angered the sacred palace Saint Sovereign. The sacred palace Saint Sovereign did not even try to avoid Jiao Yang's attack. Instead, he met Jiao Yang's attack with a palm strike. The two of them immediately started fighting at the entrance of the courtyard. The aftermath of the fight was quickly noticed by Xiao Chun, Xiao Sheng, and the others in the courtyard. In the backyard, Xiao Chun, who was originally chatting with Chun Ling and Long Qing, suddenly felt the aftermath of a battle coming from the front yard. After being slightly stunned, he said, "Someone's fighting. Let's go and take a look," said Long Qing. The three of them headed to the front yard together without any delay. When they arrived at the front yard, they saw the sacred palace Saint Sovereign fighting with Jiao Yang. Jiao Yang was naturally at a disadvantage in a one-on-one battle against the Saint Sovereign, but that did not mean that he would lose. Of course, Jiao Yang definitely had some trump cards that he had yet to use. Otherwise, as the number one chosen of the Thousand Beast Valley, Jiao Yang would have the strength to kill the Saint Sovereign. When Xiao Qin saw this scene, he shouted in a low voice, "Stop!" The sacred palace Saint Sovereign took the initiative to retreat when he heard Xiao Qin shout. He arrived in front of Xiao Chun and said indignantly, "Holy Son, he was the one who attacked first." Xiao Qin nodded in response to the sacred palace Saint Sovereign's explanation. "I know. Let's not talk about this for now." After gesturing for the sacred palace Saint Sovereign to calm down, Xiao Chun turned to look at Jiao Yang. At the same time, Jiao Yang's gaze locked onto Long Qing. There was no need for an introduction. Jiao Yang recognized Long Qing with a single glance. This was because he could sense an unfamiliar, yet incomparably familiar dragon aura from Long Qing. Compared to his own dragon aura, Long Qing's aura was clearly pure. Staring at Long Qing, Jiao Yang's eyes were filled with infatuation. She was a pure-blooded dragon, and she was so beautiful. With just one look, Jiao Yang was completely mesmerized by her. If it was only because of Long Qing's identity as a pure-blood dragon before, Jiao Yang was now completely captivated by Long Qing. Ignoring Xiao Chun and Chun Ling, Jiao Yang strode towards Long Qing. Throughout the entire process, he did not look at anyone else other than Long Qing. Standing in front of Long Qing, Jiao Yang spoke. "You must be Long Qing. I am the first holy son of the Myriad Beast Valley, Jiao Yang." Jiao Yang's attitude towards Long Qing took a 180-degree turn. However, his change did not leave a good impression on Long Qing. Therefore, Long Qing replied with a sullen expression. "What does it have to do with me?" Long Qing had no interest in knowing Jiao Yang. What bullsh * T first holy son of the Myriad Beast Valley. He was nothing in Long Qing's eyes. Jiao Yang was not angered by Long Qing's retort. Instead, he maintained a smile on his face. However, just as he was about to speak, Chun Ling interrupted him. "A mere Jiao dragon dares to have designs on second sister? What a joke. Your Flood Dragon clan is almost equivalent to a servant in front of the true dragon clan. A servant actually dares to have designs on its master." From Jiao Yang's words and actions, everyone could guess what he was thinking. This fellow clearly had designs on Long Qing. A mere Jiao dragon actually dared to have designs on a pure-blood dragon. This made Chun Ling feel extremely disdainful. Therefore, he did not hesitate to speak. Hearing Chun Ling's words, Jiao Yang's expression darkened. He finally looked at Chun Ling with killing intent in his eyes. "Do you want to die?" Chun Ling's words enraged Jiao Yang. If not for Long Qing's presence, he would have already attacked. Chun Ling did not care about Jiao Yang's cold snort. "Do you think you can kill me? Scram, don't embarrass yourself here. With your status, you want to have designs on second sister? You're courting death." Chun Ling could see Jiao Yang's arrogance. However, because of his status, Chun Ling could not be bothered to attack him. After all, the Sacred Palace and the Myriad Beast Valley were about to form an alliance. Unfortunately, Jiao Yang had no intention of appreciating Chun Ling's kindness. Hearing Chun Ling's words, the killing intent in Jiao Yang's eyes intensified. He said coldly, "Looks like you're really courting death. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 1183. Chun Ling's words made Jiao Yang unable to control the anger in his heart. Without waiting for Chun Ling's reply, Jiao Yang immediately chose to attack. Accompanied by the roar of a dragon, Jiao Yang fiercely punched out. Chun Ling did not seem to care about Jiao Yang's attack at all. He casually sent out a palm strike, and the palm strike collided with the dragon fist. At the same time, Chun Ling indifferently said, "I've killed more than one flood dragon like you." Chun Ling had killed a flood dragon before, but that was in his previous life. However, Jiao Yang, who was in a fit of anger, naturally did not listen to Chun Ling's words. He suddenly increased his strength, and the fist and palm collided. Accompanied by a muffled sound, the ground where the two were standing cracked inch by inch. The hard bluestone tiles were directly shattered like white paper. It was completely unexpected that Jiao Yang would directly attack. Perhaps in Jiao Yang's opinion, Chun Ling was not the first chosen of the Sacred Palace, so there was no need for him to be afraid. To put it bluntly, in Jiao Yang's opinion, in the entire Sacred Palace, other than the first chosen, Xiao Chun, there was no need for him to be afraid of anyone else. Unfortunately, Jiao Yang's thinking was completely wrong. This was because the 10 chosen of the Sacred Palace were a little strange compared to the chosen of the other quasi-saint sections. Although Xiao Chun was the first chosen, in terms of strength, he was not the strongest existence among the 10 chosen. Chun Yu was currently stronger than Xiao Chun, and although Chun Ling and Long Qing were not ranked as Xiao Chun, their strength was not weaker than Xiao Chen's. Therefore, Jiao Yang's estimation was clearly wrong. After a head-on collision, Chun Ling did not fall into the slightest disadvantage. Seeing this, Jiao Yang's expression changed slightly as he thought to himself, "Damn it, this guy's strength." Chunling was only the second chosen of the Sacred Palace. Logically speaking, he should not be Jiao Yang's match. However, the reality was the opposite. Chunling's strength was ridiculously strong. Neither of them had the upper hand in this exchange of blows. Longqing's face darkened when he saw this. He was about to make a move, but he was stopped by Xiao Chun. "Second elder sister, are you still worried about Big Brother? You don't have to intervene. Second elder sister only needs to release the Dragon Clan's pressure, and he will no longer be able to fight back." Xiao Chun stopped Longqing and said, "If it was any other first saint, it would be difficult to deal with them. However, it was much easier to deal with Jiao Yang. As long as Longqing released his dragon aura, Jiao Yang would not be able to resist at all. The pressure of a pure-blood dragon was absolutely irresistible to the Flood Dragon tribe. This was also the Flood Dragon tribe's greatest weakness. Many things in the world were like this. As the saying goes, fortune and misfortune go hand in hand. After the Flood Dragons obtained the power of the dragon bloodline, they became the vassals and servants of the dragon race while possessing great power. Facing the pressure of a pure-blood dragon, the Flood Dragon tribe did not have the slightest ability to resist. This had nothing to do with cultivation. It was an unreasonable suppression. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Longqing nodded slightly. Then, a dense dragon aura spread out from her body. Feeling this pressure, Xiao Chun, Chunling, and the others did not react at all. However, Jiao Yang could not help but tremble. It was as if a natural fear had been awakened from the depths of his soul. At this moment, Jiao Yang could not even circulate the spiritual energy in his body, let alone fight. Moreover, his legs unconsciously straightened as if he was about to kneel in front of Longqing. He resisted the urge to kneel, but it was all in vain. Facing the pressure of a pure-blood dragon, Jiao Yang could not resist at all. After a short while, with a bang, Jiao Yang knelt on the ground and could no longer stand up. "I already said that you flood dragons are like servants, but you didn't believe me." Seeing Jiao Yang kneel down, Chunling said indifferently. Then he slowly retracted his aura. This time, Jiao Yang ignored Chunling's words and looked at Longqing in disbelief. Previously, he did not believe that the pure-blood dragon tribe could suppress the Flood Dragon tribe. However, when he truly felt this irresistible suppression, Jiao Yang understood that the pure-blood dragon tribe was the Flood Dragon tribe's nemesis, or rather, the master. In front of other tribes, even the Huang Yi tribe or the Qilin tribe, Jiao Yang would not be so powerless. At the very least, he would be able to resist. However, in front of the pure-blood dragon tribe, Jiao Yang, as a flood dragon, could not resist at all. Just as Chunling had said, as a servant of the dragon tribe, Jiao Yang dared to have designs on Longqing. This was simply courting death. After easily dealing with Jiao Yang, Xiao Chun walked in front of Jiao Yang and looked at him calmly. Then he said to the Saint Palace, saint beside him, "Seal his cultivation. Seal his cultivation and tie him up. Let the great sage of the Valley of Beasts come and get him." Jiao Yang had arrogantly barged into the courtyard and even attacked without any explanation. Xiao Chun naturally would not let him go so easily. He would first tie him up and let the supreme sovereign of the myriad beast valley come and get him. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, a sense of humiliation rose in Jiao Yang's heart. Immediately, Jiao Yang angrily shouted, "Xiao Chun, don't you dare! Why wouldn't I dare? Tie him up. If the supreme sovereign of the myriad beast valley doesn't come, then tie him up." Xiao Chun coldly sneered. It could be said that as long as Longqing was present, Jiao Yang was a piece of trash without any battle power. Xiao Chun and Chunling did not fear him at all. After all, Longqing was his natural nemesis. Of course, this did not mean that Jiao Yang was weak. To be able to become the first holy son of the myriad beast valley, Jiao Yang's strength was not to be doubted. It was a pity that he was from the Flood Dragon tribe and had encountered Longqing. He could only blame it on his bad luck. Under Jiao Yang's furious roar, the holy venerate from the sacred palace quickly sealed Jiao Yang's cultivation. then tied him up and brought him away. He was locked up in a random room. Zhao Yang's arrival was only a small interlude. Xiao Chun and the others did not pay much attention to it. Xiao Sheng and the other supreme sovereigns did not even show up from start to finish. After dealing with Zhao Yang, Long Qing withdrew her pressure. However, her face was still cold as she said, "Little brother, why didn't you let me do it just now? Why didn't you just cripple him?" Second sister, this fellow is the first holy son of the myriad beast valley after all. If you cripple him, then this matter will not end well. It will also be difficult to explain to the myriad beast valley. Furthermore, with you here, Zhao Yang won't be able to cause any trouble. We can just punish him. Hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 1184. With Long Qing around, Zhao Yang wasn't a threat at all. Even though he was the first chosen, he posed no threat to Xiao Chun and the others. Long Qing nodded unhappily at Xiao Chen's words. Forget it then. Long Qing was very unhappy with Zhao Yang's provocation, but Xiao Chen's words made sense. With the current relationship between the Sacred Palace and the Myriad Beast Valley, they really couldn't do anything to Zhao Yang. Moreover, Xiao Chun and the others hadn't suffered any losses. On the contrary, Zhao Yang had become a prisoner of the Sacred Palace due to his arrogance. As the #1 disciple, it was extremely shameful for him to be captured and imprisoned. If news of this were spread, Zhao Yang's reputation would be ruined. Xiao Chun and the others didn't care too much about Zhao Yang's matter and soon left. As for Xiao Sheng, the three didn't report to him. It was likely that Xiao Sheng already knew what had happened. The reason he didn't show up was probably because he tacitly agreed with Xiao Chun and the others' actions. Zhao Yang's provocation was just a small difference. At the same time, in Xiao Sheng's courtyard, Great Sovereign Adam, Great Sovereign Domineering Mountain, and Great Sovereign Tianyun were all present. The four great sovereigns were sitting together in a circle. That brat Zhao Yang has kicked an iron plate this time. Just as Xiao Chun had guessed, Xiao Sheng and the others were already aware of what had happened in the front courtyard. Great Sovereign Adam smiled faintly when he heard Great Sovereign Domineering Mountain's words. It's not a big deal to capture Zhao Yang, but since Zhao Yang is in the wrong, we can do something about it. Xiao Sheng and the others exclaimed softly when they heard Great Sovereign Adam's words. They immediately turned to look at Great Sovereign Adam. Grand Monarch Aten didn't keep them in suspense. There are two secret realms in the Myriad Beast Valley. The Myriad Beast Pool is not only useful to the beast race, but also to other races. Since Zhao Yang is in our hands and we are in the wrong, I think we can. Xiao Chun had only wanted to capture Zhao Yang and humiliate him. However, Great Monarch Adon had set his sights on the heritage of the Myriad Beast Valley, the Myriad Beast Pool. Hearing Grand Monarch Aten's words, Grand Monarch Mountain immediately agreed. That's right. Let the Myriad Beast Valley open the Myriad Beast Pool. Each of our 4 sects will send 3 people to cultivate inside. Good idea. Really good idea. Under normal circumstances, the Myriad Beast Valley would definitely not allow people from other sects to enter the Myriad Beast Pool. After all, the Myriad Beast Pool's energy accumulation was extremely slow. However, with Zhao Yang in their hands, they could negotiate. Zhao Yang probably didn't expect that a simple provocation from him would cause the Myriad Beast Valley to suffer such heavy losses that they had no choice but to agree to the 4 sects' request to open the Myriad Beast Pool. Of course, this was all in the future. While Xiao Sheng and the others were discussing this, Zhao Yang, who had been locked up in a random room, still had a furious look on his face. At the same time, in addition to his anger, Zhao Yang also felt a sense of powerlessness. In front of Long Qing, Zhao Yang had thoroughly experienced what it meant to be powerless. As soon as the dragon prestige of the pure-blood dragon race was unleashed, Zhao Yang couldn't resist at all and could only be suppressed. At this moment, Zhao Yang obviously didn't dare to covet Long Qing anymore. What a joke. The pureblood dragon race was the nemesis of all flood dragons. Furthermore, after this incident, Jiao Yang clearly understood that Long Qing wouldn't take a fancy to him. He was furious, but there was nothing he could do. In his heart, he secretly thought that no matter who he offended in the future, he absolutely couldn't offend Long Qing. He was directly locked up. Early the next morning, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 Supreme Sovereigns were invited to the Myriad Beast Valley's Great Hall. Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar and the other 3 Supreme Sovereigns of the Myriad Beast Valley gathered in the Great Hall. After everyone took their seats, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar spoke first. "Everyone, we have no objections to the alliance between the Myriad Beast Valley and the 4 great sections. However, the Sacred Palace has agreed to our request, so we must fulfill it." The main purpose of today's meeting was to discuss the alliance, so Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar went straight to the point. Xiao Sheng smiled faintly. Of course. In truth, the alliance with the Myriad Beast Valley didn't have much to do with the 9 Heavens, Supreme Deity Sect, and Li Wang Sect. Firstly, the Myriad Beast Valley wouldn't ask for any resources, so they naturally wouldn't destroy the interests of the 3 sections. Secondly, the Myriad Beast Valley only agreed to the alliance because of Long Qing. Therefore, the alliance had nothing to do with the 3 sections. It could be said that the Myriad Beast Valley's alliance was mostly related to the Sacred Palace. Therefore, Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun and the other 2 Supreme Sovereigns rarely spoke because it had nothing to do with them. The matter of the alliance was quickly discussed, and in the end, it was still Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar who spoke. "Since we've formed an alliance, can we release Jiao Yang?" Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar and the others naturally knew that Jiao Yang had been locked up by Xiao Chun and the others, but they hadn't shown up yesterday. They probably wanted Jiao Yang to suffer a little and temper his temper. Now that the 5-party alliance had been formed, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar took the opportunity to bring up the matter. But hearing Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar's words, Supreme Sovereign Adam, who rarely spoke, chuckled. Of course, there's no problem with releasing Jiao Yang, but this time Jiao Yang took the initiative to provoke us. It's reasonable that the Myriad Beast Valley give us an explanation. The 3 great venerates of the Valley of Beasts smiled at each other as soon as Great Venerate Adam said this, as if they weren't too surprised. The number 1 Great Venerate of the Valley of Beasts, who was at the Great Perfection Quasi-Saint Realm, chuckled. "Of course, but what kind of explanation do the 4 of you want from the Myriad Beast Valley? I heard that the Myriad Beast Pool of the Myriad Beast Valley is a cultivation treasure land. Why don't we open it to the disciples of our 4 sects? Of course, there won't be many people. Each sect can send 3 people in," Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun said. "Open the Myriad Beast Pool as compensation?" The first Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beast Valley didn't change his expression at all, as if he had already thought of this. "Of course, there's no problem with opening the Myriad Beast Pool, but now that the 5 of us have formed an alliance, I think there should be a better way to deal with it. Of course, the Myriad Beast Valley won't shirk from giving an explanation. There was a better way?" Xiao Sheng and the other 3 Supreme Sovereigns looked at each other. Then, Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak asked, "Oh, great sage, please enlighten me. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." In a chapter. Chapter 1185. Facing the number 1 Great Venerate of the Myriad Beast Valley, Great Venerate Domineering Peak and the others behaved respectfully. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, the other party was in existence several times stronger than a perfected quasi-sage. Although they were all quasi-sages, the other party's cultivation was higher than theirs, and his combat strength was also stronger. Grand Venerate Domineering Peak asked, not knowing what the first Grand Venerate meant. The first Grand Venerate of the Myriad Beasts Valley smiled faintly. "How about this? Regarding Jiao Yang's matter, my Myriad Beast Valley will take out 1,000 divine tear pills and 1,000 sacred tear talismans as compensation. As for the Myriad Beast Pool, my Myriad Beast Valley can also open it to the public. However, according to this old man's thoughts, since our five sides have already formed an alliance, why don't we open our secret realms to the public as a form of sincerity? Previously, because we weren't in an alliance, we were suspicious of each other. However, now that we are in an alliance, we should naturally trust each other. Moreover, I believe that there are many secret realms that each side wants. For example, the nine-heaven sky thunder boundary. I believe that the Liwang sect shouldn't have a reason to refuse. Grand Venerate Tian Yun and the others were stunned when they heard the first Grand Venerate of the Myriad Beasts Valley. They couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This old man was really shrewd. Originally, they wanted to use Jiao Yang's matter to make a fortune. But who would have thought that this old man would resolve it so easily? The so-called compensation of 1,000 divine tear pills and 1,000 sacred tear talismans could be said to be completely insignificant. No one would care about such compensation. The old man's next words dragged everyone into the water. According to the old man, the Myriad Beast Valley could open the Myriad Beast Pool, but they also had to open their own secret realms to the public. It was because the alliance needed to trust each other, but everyone present knew that the old man didn't want to suffer a loss, so he dragged everyone into the water. However, there was no way he could reject the old man's suggestion. Just the Power King sect and the Heavenly Thunder Realm alone, compared to the 10,000 Beast Pool, the barbarian race would definitely want to cultivate in the Heavenly Thunder Realm. Because compared to the 10,000 Beast Pool, the Heavenly Thunder Realm was much, much more helpful. Of course, the Sacred Palace would undoubtedly benefit from the old man's suggestion. The reason was simple. The Sacred Palace had no heritage to begin with. Since there was no heritage, the Sacred Palace was basically trying to gain something without risking anything. Basically, they didn't have to pay anything, but their disciples could enter the secret realms of the other four sects to cultivate. This was a sure-win deal. The number one supreme sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley clearly knew that the Sacred Palace had gained a great advantage. As soon as he finished speaking, the number one supreme sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley secretly glanced at Xiao Sheng, a hint of a smile flashing across his eyes. It was obvious that the old man was conveying goodwill to the Sacred Palace. Xiao Sheng naturally wouldn't refuse the goodwill of the Myriad Beast Valley's number one great sovereign, but he didn't say anything either. The Sacred Palace didn't have much right to speak in this situation. Because the Sacred Palace didn't have any secret realms, it was up to the Myriad Beast Valley, Nine Heavens, Liwang sect, and Heavenly Saint sect to decide on the specifics. The Sacred Palace only needed to follow behind and reap the benefits. Of course, it wouldn't be bad for the Sacred Palace if they didn't agree. Xiao Sheng fell silent. After a moment of silence, Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak took the lead and said, "The Liwang sect agrees. Since we want to form an alliance, we naturally have to show some sincerity." It was reasonable that Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak agreed on behalf of the Liwang sect. After all, the barbarian race had been coveting the Sky Thunder Boundary for a long time. Now that there was such an opportunity, how could Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak refuse? The number one Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley remained expressionless after hearing Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak's words. He turned his gaze to Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun and waited for Nine Heaven's reply. Faced with the gaze of the number one Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley, Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun felt a little helpless. She had been tricked by this old man. He had calculated that the importance of the Sky Thunder Boundary would be satisfied, which was why he had said such a thing. Now that the Liwang sect had agreed, Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun unconsciously glanced at Xiao Sheng. Everyone knew that if this matter was successful, the Sacred Palace would undoubtedly benefit the most. Forget it. Let's just say it's for Tian Yu. Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun sighed inwardly. Nine Heavens also agrees. Since both the Liwang sect and Nine Heavens had chosen to agree, only the Supreme Divine sect was left. As for the Sacred Palace, because they didn't have any secret realms, they naturally had no right to speak. Since the three great sects had chosen to agree, the remaining Sacred Palace could be ignored. In this regard, Supreme Sovereign Adam nodded in agreement. According to the number one supreme sovereign of the myriad beasts valley, opening secret realms to each other wouldn't cause any losses to either side. Therefore, Supreme Sovereign Adam had no reason to refuse. Everyone expressed their agreement. In this regard, the number one supreme sovereign of the myriad beasts valley smiled and said, "All right, it's settled then. However, this time, only the chosen and saintesses of each sect can enter the secret realms. I believe no one has any objections to this, right? They could only allow the holy sons and holy daughters of the various sects to enter. Naturally, no one had any objections to this. After all, if too many people entered, everyone would naturally receive fewer benefits. Therefore, it was better to concentrate these resources on a limited number of people. Only then would the benefits be maximized." Everyone agreed. After a brief discussion, the Supreme Sovereigns dispersed one after another. At the same time, Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun, Supreme Sovereign Adam, and Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak all sent the news back to their sects and ordered people to prepare for the secret realms. Of course, Xiao Sheng also sent a message back to the Sacred Palace. But compared to the other four great sects, the Sacred Palace's task was much simpler. Now that the secret realms of the four great sects were about to be opened to the outside world, all the chosen and saintesses of the Sacred Palace needed to do was to choose the secret realms they wanted to enter, and then set off. After returning to his residence, Xiao Sheng went to the courtyard where Xiao Chun and the others were staying and explained the matter to them. In the end, Xiao Sheng said with a smile, "This is a good opportunity for the Sacred Palace. This is a good opportunity for the Sacred Palace. Our Sacred Palace doesn't have a secret zone of heritage. Other than Chun-Er, the other chosen and saintesses have never entered a secret zone of heritage to cultivate. Now that the four sects have opened their secret zones of heritage, the three of you should think about which secret zone you want to enter. Then you can leave." At this point, Xiao Sheng's gaze fell on Xiao Chun. Xiao Sheng naturally paid the most attention to Xiao Chun, so Xiao Sheng also gave his own suggestion. I suggest you directly choose the Myriad Beast Pool. You have already entered the Heavenly Thunder Realm, and the other secret realms of the four great sects are not very suitable for you. The Myriad Beast Pool is your best choice. Chapter 1186. The news of the four great sects opening their secret zones to the public naturally caused a commotion, especially to the 10 chosen and chosen of the Sacred Palace. After all, apart from Xiao Chun, none of them had ever entered a secret zone before. Now that they had such an opportunity, they were naturally excited. After listening to Xiao Sheng, Xiao Chun chose the Thousand Beast Pool, and so did Long Qing. As for Chun Ling, he chose the secret zone of the Supreme Divine Sect. The chosen and chosen of the 5 great sects, Sacred Palace, 9 Heavens, Li Wang Sect, Supreme Divine Sect, and Myriad Beast Valley, all chose the secret zones they wanted the most. The chosen and chosen of Li Wang's sect naturally chose the sky, thunder realm of 9 Heavens without a doubt. This was as expected. They had already agreed to open the secret zones 5 days later. Xiao Chun and Long Qing stayed in the Myriad Beast Valley, and Jiao Yang had been released long ago. After this incident, Jiao Yang had learned his lesson and didn't dare to cause trouble for Xiao Chun and the others anymore. He clearly knew that his strength was no different from paper in front of Long Qing, so he obediently chose to swallow his anger. With the 5 great sects opening their secret zones to the public, the Myriad Beast Valley's defection naturally couldn't be concealed. Originally, the Night Ghost Pavilion, Demonic Sky Hall, and Myriad Beast Valley's alliance could deal with the 4 great sects of the Sacred Palace. However, with the Myriad Beast Valley's defection, only the Night Ghost Pavilion and Demonic Sky Hall were left. They naturally couldn't contend against the 5 great sects of the Sacred Palace. Everyone in the Night Ghost Pavilion panicked when they learned of the Myriad Beast Valley's defection. Even the 3 great quasi-saint supreme sovereigns were extremely solemn. In the main hall of the Night Ghost Pavilion, The Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the other two great sovereigns of the Night Ghost Pavilion were gathered together. The Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the other two great sovereigns were looking at an elder sitting in the main seat. This elder was the first great sovereign of the Night Ghost Pavilion, and he had the cultivation of the great completion of the quasi-saint realm. The Myriad Beasts Valley has changed sides. The Night Ghost Pavilion's #1 Great Venerate said in a hoarse voice, his expression unchanged. Just like the other ghosts, the Night Ghost Pavilion's first sovereign had fair skin and a thin body. Perhaps it was because of his age, but his skin was full of wrinkles that crisscrossed with each other. At first glance, he gave off the feeling that he was about to die. However, in a Night Ghost Pavilion, or rather, in the entire North Star realm, no one dared to underestimate this dying old man, including the #1 venerables of the other quasi-sage sections. The reason was simple. The first great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion was the oldest great venerate that was still alive. People like the first great venerate of the Valley of Beasts were a generation younger than the first great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion. After living for such a long time, the cultivation of the Night Ghost Pavilion's first great sage had long reached the end of the quasi-saint realm. Unfortunately, he had not been able to break through to the great saint realm. Moreover, as time passed, he had lost the possibility of breaking through to the great saint realm. Even so, if one were to talk about who was the strongest person in the North Star realm, the first great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion was definitely the strongest person. Blood Moon, who was dressed in a black robe, sat cross-legged on the main seat. When he heard the old man's words, he nodded and replied, "Yes, the news has been confirmed. The Myriad Beast Valley has indeed changed sides. What about the demonic Sky Palace? Are they preparing to watch the fire burn across the river?" The old man asked. Since the Myriad Beast Valley had changed sides, the demonic Sky Palace would definitely be affected. Knowing that they could not win, the demonic Sky Palace would most likely draw a line with the Night Ghost Pavilion in order to protect themselves. There was no trace of panic in the old man's eyes. Blood Moon replied, "We haven't received any news yet. The demonic Sky Palace hasn't made any statements either." The Night Ghost Pavilion chose to remain silent for the time being. When the old man heard this, he slowly opened his eyes. 2 rays of cold light shot out from his turbid eyes. The situation in the North Star realm could be said to be completely clear. The Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat was a foregone conclusion. It was not that they had not thought of roping in the Myriad Beast Valley, but it was obviously impossible because the Night Ghost Pavilion did not have what the Myriad Beast Valley needed. They did not have any bargaining chips in their hands, so naturally, they did not have the capital to rope them in. Faced with a hopeless situation, the first great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion remained calm. However, there was a trace of determination in his voice. "Do you still remember the limit of the horizon that I told you about?" The limit of the horizon was the end of the North Star realm. No one knew where it led to. Moreover, people who were above the Saint realm could not pass through it. When they heard the old man mention the limit of the horizon, Blood Moon and the other great venerates' expressions changed slightly. It was obvious that they had guessed the old man's thoughts. As expected, the old man said faintly, "The Night Ghost Pavilion has lost. Send all the talented disciples out of the North Star realm. As for whether they can survive, it is up to them." The old man knew that the Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat was irreversible. At the last moment, the old man wanted to preserve the last bit of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Although he did not know what the other side of the limit of the horizon was like, compared to staying in the North Star realm and being killed, leaving the North Star realm through the limit of the horizon was undoubtedly the best choice. At least there was still a chance of survival. Hearing the old man's words, Blood Moon and the other great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion could not help but speak up. "The limit of the horizon is too mysterious. It is not completely impossible for us to fight to the death." Obviously, they did not agree with the old man's decision. However, the old man was not moved at all. There is no such thing as eternal prosperity in this world. No matter how strong a sect or force is, There will be a day when it will be destroyed. Just like those great saint sects in the ancient times. They were strong enough to have a great saint overseeing them, right? But in the end, they were still destroyed in the long river of time. As the pillar of a sect, we must recognize the situation at all times. Now that the Night Ghost Pavilion has no chance of winning, sending some people out can be considered as a way to preserve the Night Ghost Pavilion. In the face of imminent defeat and destruction, the old man was very calm. After living for so many years, he did not dare to say that he had seen through life and death, but at least he was as calm as an ancient well. In the face of death, he did not waver in the slightest. Blood Moon and the other great venerate fell silent when they heard the old man's words. After a while, they stood up and bowed, then left to make preparations. The Night Ghost Pavilion was bound to lose in the Sacred Palace's five-party alliance, even with the help of the demonic Sky Hall. Moreover, would the demonic Sky Hall still stand on the Night Ghost Pavilion side? Obviously, it was impossible. The people of the demonic Sky Hall were not fools. They would not die with the Night Ghost Pavilion. After Blood Moon and the other great venerate left, only the old man was left in the hall. The light in his eyes slowly dissipated. The old man seemed to have lost his vitality, but he still murmured softly, "It seems that there is no hope for me to reach the great saint realm in this lifetime. Please add me to your collection. Monthly votes recommend me." In a chapter. Chapter 1187. With a sigh, the old man's figure slowly disappeared from the hall. They did not know what was going on at the Night Ghost Pavilion, and they did not notice that the Night Ghost Pavilion had already started to move their elite disciples. Any disciple with some talent had been secretly sent to the extreme of the horizon by the Night Ghost Pavilion. They wanted to leave the North Star realm through that place. However, no one knew how many people would survive in the end. After all, no one knew what was on the other side of the horizon or whether it was dangerous. For the time being, there was no time to pay attention to the Night Ghost Pavilion's actions. 5 days later, the secret zones of the four great sects, the Myriad Beast Valley, Supreme Divine Sect, Liwang Sect, and Ninth Heaven, opened at the same time. The Chosens who had already chosen their secret zones entered one after another. Xiao Chun and Long Qing chose the Myriad Beast Pool of the Myriad Beast Valley. At the same time, the 8th Chosen of the Sacred Palace, Hu Fei, and 2 other Chosens of the Myriad Beast Valley entered with them. A total of 5 people entered the Myriad Beast Pool. As the entrance to the Myriad Beast Pool opened, Supreme Sovereign Hu Shao, who was in charge of guarding the place, shouted, "Go in. There's no time limit for the Myriad Beast Pool this time, but it's best to leave as soon as possible if you can't endure it. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." The 5 great sects had already discussed the opening of their secret zones. There was no time limit. As long as they could endure it, they could stay for as long as they wanted. This was also to give the Chosens of the 5 great sects a chance. Xiao Chun and the others strode into the Myriad Beast Pool. Compared to the 2 Chosens of the Myriad Beast Valley, Xiao Chun and the others were clearly unfamiliar with the Myriad Beast Pool. After passing through the entrance, Xiao Chun saw a black pool. There was nothing around it. The black pool wasn't very large. It was round and only about 70 to 80 meters wide. Along the way to the edge of the pool, the 2 holy sons from the Myriad Beast Valley kindly reminded them, "The energy in the Myriad Beast Pool is very violent, and the closer you are to the center, the stronger the energy is. This is your first time here, so it's best for you to cultivate at the edge. After you've adapted, you can slowly approach the center of the pool." Everyone was already in an alliance, and Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon, so the 2 holy sons from the Valley of Beasts spoke up to remind her. Of course, when they said this, it was more for Long Qing. As for Xiao Chun and Hu Fei, it was almost equivalent to saying it in passing. However, Xiao Chun did not take the 2's kind reminder to heart. When he heard this, he still cupped his hands together and thanked them politely. "Thank you very much. We will remember this." "You're welcome." When they heard Xiao Chen's thanks, the 2 of them returned the gesture. Afterwards, They cupped their hands together and bowed to Long Qing before jumping into the pool first. The Myriad Beast pool had two main effects. One was to temper the body, and the other was to increase cultivation. These two effects were of great help to Xiao Chun. This was also the reason why Xiao Shang had suggested Xiao Chun choose the Myriad Beast pool. This was because compared to other things, Xiao Chen's body and cultivation were more important. Xiao Chun could only rely on his own talent to comprehend sword techniques and martial techniques. There was no need to waste this precious opportunity. As the two holy sons from the Valley of Beasts jumped into the pool, Xiao Chun and the others also jumped into the pool. In the beginning, Xiao Chun did not feel anything special when he entered the water. However, very soon, Xiao Chun felt a sliver of numbness flowing through his body. It was only a slight numbness, but there was no pain at all. Of course, Xiao Chun and the others were only cultivating at the edge of the pool at this moment. It doesn't seem that impressive. Xiao Chun could not help but glance at Long Qing and Hu Fei. Just like him, Long Qing did not feel anything unusual. However, Hu Fei was gritting his teeth at this moment. It seemed like he was in great pain. It was their first time entering the Myriad Beast pool, so Xiao Chun and Long Qing were completely immune to the energy at the edge. However, Hu Fei was not. This cannot be helped. In terms of physical strength, Hu Fei was clearly inferior to Xiao Chun and Long Qing. Moreover, Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon. Cultivating in the Myriad Beast pool was like a fish in water. It seemed like Hu Fei would need some time to adapt. In response, Xiao Chun looked at Long Qing and said, "Second sister, shall we go a little?" Yes. The energy at the edge was not very useful to Xiao Chun and Long Qing. After hearing Xiao Chun's suggestion, Long Qing nodded slightly. Then, the two of them swam towards the center of the pool. Xiao Chun and Long Qing started swimming towards the center of the Myriad Beast pool since it was their first time entering. Seeing this scene, the two holy sons from the Valley of Beasts were slightly stunned. One of them exclaimed, "That's impossible. It's their first time entering the Myriad Beast pool. How dare they swim toward the center?" Long Qing is a pure-blooded dragon. Naturally, she has no problem in the Myriad Beast pool. However, Xiao Chun is a human. It seems like his physical strength is very strong, the other holy son said. It was not strange that Long Qing could withstand the energy in the Myriad Beast pool. However, it was strange that Xiao Chun could do so. There was only one explanation, and that was that Xiao Chun's physical strength was ridiculously strong. Without stopping, Xiao Chun and Long Qing quickly overtook the two holy sons from the Valley of Beasts. At this moment, the two of them were less than 30 meters away from the center of the Myriad Beast pool. At this point, Xiao Chun finally felt a slight tingling sensation in his body. He could not help but look at Long Qing. Xiao Chun asked, "Second sister, how do you feel?" "I don't feel anything," Long Qing replied with a smile when she heard Xiao Chun's question. They were already here, but Long Qing still did not feel anything. Hearing this, Xiao Chun could not help but smile bitterly. She really was a pure-blooded dragon, the king of the beasts. It seemed that Long Qing was like a fish in water in the Myriad Beast pool. After swimming for another 10 meters, they were less than 20 meters away from the center. At this point, Xiao Chun did not continue because he felt a sharp pain in his body. He had almost reached his limit. He planned to cultivate here first and slowly adapt to the violent energy in the Myriad Beast pool before continuing to the center. Xiao Chun stopped moving forward, but Long Qing was still not panting. In the end, Xiao Chun smiled helplessly. "Second sister, don't worry about me. Go ahead and cultivate. Don't waste this opportunity." Long Qing nodded when she heard Xiao Chun's words. Then, she continued to swim towards the center of the Myriad Beast pool. It was Long Qing's first time entering the Myriad Beast pool, yet he was able to reach the central area directly. Looking at Long Qing, the two holy sons of the Myriad Beast Valley had completely lost their temper. This was the terror of a pure-blooded dragon. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1188. As a pure-blooded dragon, The violent energy in the pool was completely useless to Long Qing. Long Qing was like a fish in water in the pool. The two saints looked at Long Qing enviously. They felt a little bitter. Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon, but Xiao Chun, a human, was actually stronger than them. It was Xiao Chen's first time entering the myriad beast pool, and he was already less than 20 meters away from the central area. This made the two holy sons of the myriad beast valley feel extremely bitter. Xiao Chun had no idea what the two holy sons of the Valley of Beasts were thinking. He was completely immersed in his cultivation. The Valley of Beasts did have a very strong tempering effect on the body. However, Xiao Chen's temper battle body had already reached the third heavenly layer, so his progress was very slow. Even so, Xiao Chun was ecstatic about such a slow progress. This was because ever since his tempered battle body had broken through to the third level of the heavenly realm, Xiao Chun had not been able to make any progress in his tempered battle body at all. After a period of exploration, Xiao Chun had also determined that the tempered battle body could no longer be improved by simply relying on cultivation after reaching the third level of the celestial plane. It required the support of an enormous amount of resources to allow the tempered battle body to continue to improve. Now that the myriad beast pool was indeed very helpful to the cultivation of the tempered battle body, how could Xiao Chun not be overjoyed? It should be known that at the celestial layer, every step of the tempered battle body could be said to be extremely difficult. Ordinary body tempering treasures were already useless. Delighted, Xiao Chun began to cultivate the tempered battle body with all his might. Every bit of progress counted. At the same time, Xiao Chen's cultivation also began to steadily improve with the help of the myriad beast pool. Compared to the tempered battle body, the improvement of cultivation was clearly much easier. Furthermore, as time passed, Xiao Chen also gradually adapted to the violent energy in the myriad beast pool. The five of them cultivated in the myriad beast pool. None of them spoke. Every single one of them had their eyes closed tightly and did not waste a single shred of time. This was an extremely rare opportunity for the five of them. None of them wanted to miss it. 3 days passed very quickly as they cultivated in silence. During these 3 days, Hu Fei had advanced 10 meters, and the two saints had advanced 10 meters as well. At the same time, Xiao Chun had arrived less than 15 meters away from the central region. On the other hand, Long Qing had always been cultivating in the central region. Time slowly passed. Xiao Chen's cultivation had already reached the limits of the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm, and he was not far away from perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. Right when Xiao Chun was cultivating with all his might, Long Qing suddenly arrived by Xiao Chen's side. When he noticed Long Qing's appearance, Xiao Chen opened his eyes and cried out with bewilderment. Second sister, all of them were cultivating, but Long Qing had suddenly appeared by their side. Obviously, there was something. Long Qing spoke softly when faced with Xiao Chen's question. I've discovered a treasure below. Come with me. She spoke softly to Xiao Chun, and then a strand of warm bloodline energy effused out from within Long Qing's body and enveloped Xiao Chen's body. For a time, the pain in his body instantly vanished. He knew that Long Qing had utilized her bloodline energy to obstruct the violent energy of the myriad beast pool for him, and that was the only reason why Xiao Chun was able to follow Long Qing to the central region of the myriad beast pool. It didn't take long for Xiao Chun and Long Qing to arrive at the central region of the myriad beast pool as they followed Long Qing. At this moment, Long Qing spoke softly to Xiao Chun. Follow me closely later. The energy below is extremely violent, and you won't be able to resist it by yourself. The treasure Long Qing spoke of clearly wasn't here. Xiao Chun nodded when he heard that, and then the two of them dived towards the bottom of the pool. Looking at Long Qing's actions, the treasure she spoke of should be at the bottom of the myriad beast pool. Xiao Chun didn't have time to ask, and could only follow closely behind Long Qing. Just as Long Qing had said, the deeper they dived, the more violent the surrounding energy became. Fortunately, Xiao Chun was protected by Long Qing's bloodline energy, or else he wouldn't have been able to resist the violent energy. As they dived deeper, the seemingly small myriad beast pool was like a bottomless pit. After a full 15 minutes, the two of them still hadn't seen the bottom of the pool. They didn't know how deep the Myriad Beast Pool was. Perhaps no one had ever dived to the bottom of the Myriad Beast Pool before. After all, other than a pure-blooded dragon like Long Qing, no other beast ancestor would be able to withstand the violent energy here. Even a flood dragon like Jiao Yang wouldn't be able to. The surroundings were completely dark, and they couldn't even see their own fingers. After diving for another hour, Xiao Chun finally saw the bottom of the pool. What shocked Xiao Chun was that the bottom of the Myriad Beast Pool was actually funnel-shaped, which meant that the stone edge was high and the middle was low. The bottom of the pool in the central area was obviously much deeper than the surrounding pools. Such a structure was very strange. At this point, Long Qing obviously didn't have any intention of stopping. She continued to dive deeper. Her goal should be the deepest part of the central area. They continued to dive across the surrounding pools. This time, it only took a cup of tea's time before Xiao Chun saw the bottom of the pool. However, what Xiao Chun didn't expect was that there was actually an entrance to a cave house. There was a cave house here, and he didn't know who built it. Before he could ask, Long Qing had already entered the cave house. Seeing this, Xiao Chun naturally hurriedly followed. This should be a secret cave house. After Xiao Chun and Long Qing entered, there were no longer violent energy fluctuations like in the Myriad Beast Pool. A huge mountain peak came into sight, but there wasn't a single blade of grass growing on it. However, when Xiao Chun saw this mountain peak, he was stunned on the spot, because this huge mountain peak seemed to be coiled by a bone dragon from the foot of the mountain all the way to the top. The dragon's head was at the top of the mountain peak. It should have been dead for a long time because at this moment, only its bones were left. Its skin and flesh had completely disappeared. This was the first time he saw such a huge dragon. Judging from its size, it should be at least a few thousand feet long. With a look of horror, Xiao Chun said unconsciously, "This is a dragon. It can't be considered a dragon. It's just a flood dragon. But judging from its size, it should be a flood dragon that has reached the quasi-saint realm." Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing said with some disdain, "It's just a flood dragon." Upon hearing that, Xiao Chun was taken aback. Then he asked doubtfully, "Second sister, is this the treasure you mentioned?" Long Qing said that there was a treasure, but now there was only this flood dragon skeleton in front of him. Xiao Chen naturally thought that the treasure Long Qing mentioned was this flood dragon skeleton. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1189. In response to Xiao Chen's question, Long Qing smiled and nodded. "That's right, that's it." The treasure Long Qing was talking about was indeed the serpent dragon skeleton. Hearing that, Xiao Chun asked in confusion, "What can this skeleton do? It doesn't even have any flesh." According to Xiao Chen's understanding, the most precious part of a demonic beast was its essence and blood, followed by its flesh and blood, because the flesh and blood contained very pure energy. It was not that Xiao Chun had not used the essence and blood of demonic beasts to cultivate his physical body before. However, the flesh and blood of the Jiao dragon in front of him had completely disappeared, leaving only its bones behind. What else could be valuable? Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing said with disdain, "You really don't know anything. How can a serpent dragon compare to a normal demon beast? Although it has lost its flesh and 90% of its good stuff, even if it's only left with its skeleton, it'll still give you a lot of benefits. It'll definitely be better than cultivating in the Myriad Beast Pool." The serpent dragon skeleton also had great benefits. Xiao Chen did not doubt Long Qing's words at all. After all, Long Qing was from the Beast Clan, so she naturally knew a lot about the Beast Clan. However, according to Long Qing, since there were such great benefits, Xiao Chun did not want to monopolize it. Instead, he shook his head and refused. "If that's the case, then second sister can do it. You're from the Beast Clan, so these things should be better for you. I'll cultivate in the Myriad Beast Pool. It'll be fine." There was no need to be polite with Long Qing. Since they were both from the Beast Clan, Xiao Chun naturally believed that the serpent dragon skeleton would be better for Long Qing. Therefore, Xiao Chen wanted to give it to Long Qing. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing's heart warmed. She knew that Xiao Chen was thinking for her. Faced with a serpent dragon skeleton, if it was anyone else, even if they were brothers, they would probably turn against each other. However, Xiao Chen was not greedy at all. Instead, he immediately gave this opportunity to Long Qing. Although her heart felt warm, Long Qing still laughed and scolded. "You really are a stupid boy. I already said that this is a serpent dragon. Do you think it's good for me to refine it? Moreover, if you want to refine this serpent dragon skeleton, you'll need my help. Let's stop talking nonsense and get ready. I'll help you refine this serpent dragon skeleton." A serpent dragon was naturally not attractive to Long Qing. What a joke. Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon. Was there a need to refine a serpent dragon? Clearly, there was no need. To Long Qing, this serpent dragon skeleton was worthless. However, to Xiao Chen, this serpent dragon skeleton was undoubtedly a priceless treasure. As soon as she finished speaking, Long Qing did not wait for Xiao Chen's reply. Accompanied by a dragon's roar, she directly transformed into her original form. A gigantic azure dragon appeared in front of Xiao Chen. With the increase in her strength, Long Qing's original form also became more powerful and domineering. Now that she had transformed into her original form, she unconsciously exuded a strong pressure that was extremely oppressive. The dragon's roar shook the sky. Then, Long Qing flew toward the serpent dragon skeleton. Compared to the serpent dragon skeleton, Long Qing's body was clearly much smaller. However, the azure light on Long Qing's body shone brightly. Soon, the azure light enveloped the entire serpent dragon skeleton. Long Qing was refining the power of the serpent dragon skeleton for Xiao Chen. It was impossible for Xiao Chen to refine a serpent dragon that had reached the quasi-saint realm when it was alive. Only a pure-blooded dragon like Long Qing could refine this serpent dragon skeleton with the power of her bloodline. Only then could Xiao Chen successfully refine and absorb this serpent dragon skeleton. As the azure light refined, the serpent dragon's skeleton slowly began to melt at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, Long Qing's voice sounded. "Little brother, get ready." He reminded Xiao Chen to get ready. Hearing this, Xiao Chen did not hesitate and sat down cross-legged. At the same time, a white light shot towards Xiao Chen from the azure light and entered Xiao Chen's body. The white light was the pure energy that Long Qing had refined from the serpent dragon skeleton for Xiao Chen. After Long Qing's refinement, it was very easy for Xiao Chen to refine this energy now. Long Qing refined it continuously, and Xiao Chen also closed his eyes and began to absorb it. This continued for 3 days. The energy of the serpent dragon skeleton had been completely refined by Long Qing. At this time, in the sky directly in front of Xiao Chen, a fist-sized, liquid-like white ball was suspended in the air. The white light was constantly shooting out of the ball and entering Xiao Chen's body. In 3 days, Long Qing's task had been completed. Now, all that was left was to wait for Xiao Chen to refine the energy. Long Qing returned to her human form and stood in front of Xiao Chen. Her face was slightly pale. Clearly, refining the energy was not an easy task for Long Qing. However, since it was for Xiao Chen, Long Qing did not complain at all. She smiled at Xiao Chen and whispered softly, "Little brother, go ahead and refine the energy. Little brother, you can refine it here by yourself. I'll return to the 10,000 beast pool first. I'll come back to pick you up after you've finished refining it." With that, Long Qing left the cave dwelling. Xiao Chen was cultivating in the cave dwelling. At the same time, in the outside world, the world energy in the sacred palace suddenly became violent. All the world energy in the sacred region madly gathered towards a cave dwelling in the depths of the sacred palace. Sensing the change in the world energy, the sacred palace Saint Sovereign's expressions changed drastically. Is someone breaking through? An ancestor's cave dwelling? An ancestor is about to break through. An ancestor was about to break through. For a moment, the entire sacred palace was in an uproar. An ancestor's breakthrough was equivalent to a breakthrough in the quasi-saint realm. Everyone's guess was right. At this moment, the heaven and earth spirit Qi was constantly gathering in Xiao Sheng's cave abode. At the same time, Xiao Sheng, who was sitting cross-legged on a mountain peak, was also glowing with golden light. Not far from the mountain peak, Randing, Bing Lian, and Meng Jie were all present. They looked at Xiao Chen and said with a smile, "He's finally broken through." It seems that Xiao Sheng is indeed the first among the four of us to break through. Over the years, Xiao Sheng and the other three had not neglected their cultivation. Now that Xiao Sheng had broken through, it meant that the sacred palace had one more minor quasi-saint great sovereign. This was something that the sacred palace desperately needed. Although it was still not comparable to the other 6 quasi-saint sects, it was still an improvement. As time passed, the fluctuations of spiritual power around Xiao Sheng became more and more terrifying, causing the space around Xiao Chen to distort. Then, cracks began to appear. A breakthrough in the quasi-saint realm was absolutely terrifying. Therefore, all the disciples, deacons, elders, and saint sovereigns in the sacred palace sensed Xiao Sheng's breakthrough. Everyone's eyes involuntarily locked onto the cave dwellings of the 4 ancestors in the depths of the sacred palace's main peak, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1190. Countless pairs of eyes stared intently at the 4 patriarchs' cave residences in the depths of the sacred palace as some patriarchs were breaking through. It was still impossible to determine which patriarch was breaking through. About a day later, the heaven and earth spiritual power in the sacred region slowly calmed down. At this time, everyone finally knew that it was Patriarch Xiao Sheng who had broken through to the minor mastery of the quasi-saint realm. Everyone in the sacred palace was naturally very excited about Xiao Sheng's breakthrough, because the stronger the patriarch was, the stronger the sacred palace would be. As disciples of the sacred palace, they naturally shared the glory of the sacred palace. It could be said that Xiao Sheng's breakthrough had greatly boosted the morale of many sacred palace attendants, elders, and disciples. Everyone felt proud to be a part of the sacred palace. Compared to everyone's excitement, Xiao Sheng appeared very calm. After so many years of bitter cultivation, he had finally broken through to the minor mastery of the quasi-saint realm. Although he was still far from a number 1 grand venerables of the other 6 major quasi-saint sects, he had taken a step forward. Xiao Sheng, who had broken through, was sitting with Dipamkara, Bing Lian, and Meng Jie in a circle in the cave residence. Bing Lian and Meng Jie sat on Xiao Sheng's left and right with faint smiles on their faces. Dipamkara sat opposite Xiao Sheng and also said with a smile, "Your breakthrough this time is a joyous occasion for our sacred palace. There's nothing to be proud of. The strength of the 4 of us is still far from the grand venerables of the other quasi-saint sects, especially the number 1 grand venerables of the various sections. They are all existences at the perfection of the quasi-saint realm." Xiao Sheng replied calmly upon hearing Dipamkara's words, as if he wasn't the slightest bit excited about his breakthrough. Dipamkara nodded slightly in agreement upon hearing Xiao Sheng's words. Upon seeing this, Xiao Sheng chuckled and said, "You're almost at the minor mastery of the quasi-saint realm, right?" "Yes, it should be soon." Randing nodded and replied. Xiao Sheng was the first to break through, but Dipamkara, Bing Lian, and Meng Jie had also reached the peak of the quasi-saint stage. With their talent, they should be about to break through to the initial stage of the quasi-saint stage. If they could successfully break through, the strength of the sacred palace would obviously increase. The sacred palace patriarch, Xiao Sheng's breakthrough, delighted everyone in the sacred palace. However, the chosen and saintesses, who were in various secret zones, were obviously unaware of this matter. Several days passed in a row in the cave at the bottom of the Thousand Beast Pool. Xiao Qin's eyes were still closed. At the same time, the energy from the serpent dragon skeleton continued to pour into Xiao Qin's body. Xiao Qin was like a sponge, frantically absorbing this pure energy. With Long Qing's help, it was indeed much easier for Xiao Chun to refine this energy. But even so, Xiao Chun still needed a long time to completely absorb and refine such a huge amount of pure energy. Of course, most of the energy was absorbed by Xiao Chun's body. This was also deliberately done by Xiao Chun. There was no doubt that the 100-tempered battle body was powerful, but the resources required to cultivate it were also astounding. Now that he had this opportunity, Xiao Chun naturally wanted to improve his 100-tempered battle body a little more. Although this amount of energy was completely inadequate for Xiao Chun, who had already broken through to the 3rd level, the 100-tempered battle body was still improving. Although it wasn't enough to directly break through to the 4th level, it still greatly strengthened Xiao Chun's body. Moreover, while he was cultivating his body, Xiao Chun was also improving his cultivation. Presently, Xiao Chun could clearly sense the threshold of perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. After a few days of cultivation, the white ball of light that seemed like liquid had shrunk greatly. At this moment, Xiao Chun stopped cultivating his body and was prepared to use the last bit of energy to help him break through to perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. The cultivation of the 100-tempered battle body wasn't something that could be accomplished in a day. Presently, he only needed to improve his 100-tempered battle body a little more, and that was enough to make Xiao Chun extremely excited. Moreover, the 100-tempered battle body had improved greatly after obtaining such great benefits this time, so it was time for him to break through. After he made up his mind, Xiao Chun started to attempt to break through the barrier of the Tao Emperor realm. Along with his repeated attempts, the pure energy was ceaselessly refined and absorbed by Xiao Chun. In the end, along with the last strand of energy entering Xiao Chun's body, the white ball of light vanished. A muffled bang resounded from Xiao Chun's body, and then Xiao Chun's aura suddenly rose explosively. It instantly broke through the limits of the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm and arrived at perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. Actually, breaking through a minor realm wasn't too difficult for the first Holy Son at Xiao Chun's level. So long as he had sufficient resources and energy to support it, and coupled with sufficient accumulation, then breaking through could practically be said to be a matter of course. Xiao Chun didn't feel too excited because he'd broken through to perfection of the Tao Emperor realm because it was within his expectations. The energy within the quasi-saint realm, WRM skeleton, had been completely refined and absorbed. Along with his breakthrough, Xiao Chun let out a light breath of air and slowly opened his eyes. At the same time, Long Qing had returned to the abode at this moment, and he just happened to witness the scene of Xiao Chun breaking through. Long Qing smiled as he spoke. "You broke through?" "Yes." Xiao Chun nodded lightly when he heard this. Long Qing smiled when he saw this. "Then let's go. There's no value in this place anymore. Return to the myriad beast pool and stabilize your cultivation, and then we can leave our closed-door cultivation." Without the WRM skeleton, this abode was obviously completely worthless. Xiao Chun nodded lightly when he heard Long Qing. At the same time, Xiao Chun clearly sensed that Long Qing had broken through to perfection of the Tao Emperor realm as well. Needless to say, Long Qing's breakthrough was much easier than his. With such a formidable bloodline, Long Qing practically didn't have to comprehend anything. Along with his growth, Long Qing's breakthrough could practically be said to be natural, and there wouldn't be any obstructions. This was a formidable aspect of the dragon clan. So long as it wasn't a pure blood dragon, then any pure blood dragon was bound to be an expert of an area, and they were at least at the saint realm. She returned to the myriad beast pool with Long Qing. All along the way, Xiao Chun was still protected by Long Qing's bloodline. After returning to the myriad beast pool, Xiao Chun noticed that only he and Long Qing remained in the entire myriad beast pool. As for Hu Fei and the other two chosen from a myriad beast valley, they were nowhere to be seen. They left first. They were unable to endure the violent energy within the myriad beast pool. Long Qing spoke when he saw Xiao Chun sizing up the surroundings. Half a month had passed since they entered the myriad beast pool. During this period of time, Hu Fei and the other two chosen from the Myriad Beast Valley had already reached their limits, so they had no choice but to withdraw from the Myriad Beast Pool, begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 1191. Hu Fei and the two holy sons of the Myriad Beast Valley had already left the Myriad Beast Pool. Now, only Xiao Chun and Long Qing were left in the pool. Xiao Chun did not say anything else after hearing Long Qing's words. It was a rare opportunity to enter the Myriad Beast Pool, so Xiao Chun naturally would not waste it. Due to the improvement of the tempered battle body and his breakthrough in cultivation, Xiao Chun could now endure the energy in the center of the Myriad Beast Pool. However, the pain was still extremely intense. Enduring the excruciating pain, Xiao Chun began to cultivate in the central area. Xiao Chun had just made a breakthrough, so naturally, he would not think about making another breakthrough this time. Instead, he used the energy in the Myriad Beast Pool to fully consolidate the realm he had just broken through. Xiao Chun cultivated bitterly, while Long Qing did nothing to the side. The energy in the Myriad Beast Pool was not of much help to Long Qing anymore, so there was no point in continuing to cultivate. Long Qing could have left the Myriad Beast Pool long ago, but since Xiao Chun was still here, Long Qing naturally stayed behind. Xiao Chun did not pay attention to the outside world as he continued his final cultivation in the Myriad Beast Pool. Xiao Chun and Long Qing had already stayed in the Myriad Beast Valley for almost 20 days. On this day, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar and several saints from the Myriad Beast Valley came to the entrance of the Myriad Beast Pool. They stared at the entrance, and one of them said in shock, "It's already been 20 days, right?" "Yes, it's been 20 days today," another saint replied. Jiaoyang only stayed in the Myriad Beast Pool for 18 days, but the two of them have actually stayed for 20 days. Long Qing is still all right. After all, she's a pure-blooded dragon. She has a natural advantage in the Myriad Beast Pool, but Xiao Chun is a human. I never thought that he would be able to last 20 days in the Myriad Beast Pool. 20 days had already broken the record of the Myriad Beast Pool. However, it was clear that Xiao Chun and Long Qing still had no intention of coming out. Another 10 days passed. It had been a full month since Xiao Chun and Long Qing entered the Myriad Beast Pool. The other holy sons and holy virgins had all come out of their secret realms. Only Xiao Chun and Long Qing were still in the Myriad Beast Pool. The more time passed, the more surprised everyone became. Just as everyone was guessing if Xiao Chun and Long Qing had died in the Myriad Beast Pool, Xiao Chun and Long Qing finally came out of the Myriad Beast Pool. During this month of time, both of them had broken through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm. Moreover, their auras had completely stabilized. Along with their appearance, the matter of the four great sects opening the secret realm to the outside world could be considered to have come to a perfect end. Practically all the saints that entered the secret realm obtained enormous benefits, and their cultivations improved. Of course, the sacred palace was naturally the one who benefited the most. It wasn't just because the sacred palace had the most holy sons and holy virgins, it was also because the holy sons and holy virgins of the sacred palace had improved the most. They had finally come out of seclusion. While Xiao Chun and Long Qing were in seclusion, the sacred palace and the Myriad Beast Valley had successfully constructed a teleportation formation. After resting in the Myriad Beast Valley for a day, Xiao Chun and Long Qing returned to the sacred palace through the teleportation formation the next morning. They were gone for several months. After returning to his cave dwelling, Xiao Chun saw Qin Shu, Tian Yu, and the other two girls. Tian Yu had also entered the secret realm this time, and her strength had improved as well. On the other hand, Qin Shu and the other two girls didn't have such an opportunity, so their strength hadn't improved much. After chatting with the four girls for a while, Xiao Chun went to greet Bai Riyue and Xiao Qing. Just as the holy sons and holy virgins were returning to their respective sects, the ancestors of the five great sects had gathered in the sacred palace in a short 2 days. The ancestors of the five great sects had gathered for only one thing, and that was to deal with the night ghost pavilion. Now that the myriad Beast Valley had changed sides, the Night Ghost Pavilion was basically a fish on the chopping board. Now that the holy sons and holy virgins had come out of seclusion, it was time to make a move. On this day, the atmosphere in the sacred palace had become somewhat solemn, especially on the main peak. Over 100 saints from the 5 great sects had surrounded the main peak so tightly that not even a fly could get in. Under such tight protection, the sacred palace, Li Wang sect, Supreme Deity sect, Ninth Heaven, and myriad Beast Valley's quasi-saint supreme sovereigns were sitting together in a circle. 16 quasi-saint supreme sovereigns. This could be said to be the most luxurious lineup on Luxury Island. Moreover, among the 16 supreme sovereigns, 4 of them were existences at the peak of the quasi-saint realm. They were the number 1 supreme sovereign of the Li Wang sect, Mangu, Supreme Deity sect, Jiang Taishan, Supreme Deity sect, Tianju, Ninth Heaven, and Lion Zong, the number 1 supreme sovereign of the myriad Beast Valley. Mangu, the number 1 supreme sovereign of the Li Wang sect, whose body was like a small mountain, was the first to speak. Now that the time is ripe, isn't it time to make a move? When Mangu said to make a move, he naturally meant to make a move against the Night Ghost Pavilion. Now that the Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat was set in stone, there was no need to worry about anything. However, Tianju, the number 1 supreme sovereign of Ninth Heaven, who was sitting beside Mangu, said indifferently, "It's time to make a move, but there's still a problem that needs to be paid attention to." "Oh, Brother Tianju, please speak frankly." Supreme Deity sect's number 1 supreme sovereign, Jiang Taishan, chuckled softly. "Be careful of old man, Ku Gue." Tianju didn't beat around the bush and said bluntly. Ku Gue was the number 1 Grand Venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion. He was also the oldest Grand Venerate among all the Grand Venerates in the North Star boundary. Many of the Grand Venerates present were at least 1 generation younger than Ku Gue. Withered Ghost had lived for so many years. Obviously, some people knew what level his strength had reached. However, one thing was certain. Withered Ghost definitely hadn't broken through to the Great Sage realm. Otherwise, the entire North Star boundary should have sensed his Great Sage realm talent. Even so, Ku Gue was definitely an existence that couldn't be underestimated. It was precisely because he was present that everyone had to be careful. Other than Ku Gue, the other experts of the Night Ghost Pavilion were simply not worth mentioning. Hearing Tianju mention Ku Gue, everyone's expression changed slightly, but soon, the number 1 supreme sovereign of the myriad Beast Valley, Lion Sect, spoke up. "The 4 of us together can't deal with Ku Gue. With the same cultivation level, no matter how strong Ku Gue is, can he fight against 4 people at the same cultivation level? Or do you think that at the quasi-saint realm, there are still people who can fight above their cultivation level, winning with fewer people?" The 5 great sects had 4 supreme sovereigns of the quasi-saint realm. There shouldn't be any surprises if 4 of them fought against one. Therefore, Lion Sect's words were full of confidence. Although Ku Gue was strong, he wasn't an invincible existence. Lion Sect's 4 supreme sovereigns present didn't dare to say that they could win one-on-one, but 4 against 1 was completely different. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1192. Ku Gue indeed needed to be careful, but it was clearly impossible for him to turn the tide alone. Therefore, none of the supreme sovereigns present objected to Lion Sect's words. "You're right, but what about the demonic Sky Hall? They're still in an alliance with the Night Ghost Pavilion." Jiang Taishan, the first supreme sovereign of the Supreme God sect, said softly. "The demonic Sky Hall. Although the Night Ghost Pavilion would undoubtedly die even with the help of the demonic Sky Hall, this would obviously increase the number of casualties. Moreover, if Ku Gue joined forces with the old man from the demonic Sky Hall, it would indeed be somewhat troublesome. However, Tianju, Mangu, and Lion Sect's 3 supreme sovereigns smiled indifferently at Jiang Taishan's words. If the demonic Sky Hall is smart, they will definitely not stand on the same side as the Night Ghost Pavilion. I think it won't be long before the demonic Sky Hall sends people over, said Tianju. The Night Ghost Pavilion's fate was already clear. If the demonic Sky Hall still wanted to tie themselves to the Night Ghost Pavilion, it would be tantamount to digging their own grave. However, if the demonic Sky Hall wanted to withdraw now, they would have to pay a price. Let's spread the news that our 5 great sects have declared war on the Night Ghost Pavilion at the same time. Firstly, it will affect the Night Ghost Pavilion's morale, and secondly, we can see the demonic Sky Hall's reaction. Mangu added, the 4 supreme sovereigns agreed on the matter one after another. During this process, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 patriarchs of the Sacred Palace had no right to intervene. It couldn't be helped. The 4 supreme sovereigns were all at the perfect quasi-saint stage and held high authority among the supreme sovereigns. Now that the 4 of them had agreed on this matter together, Xiao Sheng and the others naturally couldn't interfere. With strength came the right to speak. This was a principle that had never changed since time immemorial. This point was most directly reflected in the Supreme Sovereign's discussion today. Because the Sacred Palace didn't have any Supreme Sovereigns at the perfect quasi-saint stage, the Sacred Palace didn't have any right to speak in this discussion. Xiao Sheng and the others were well aware of this. They felt somewhat disappointed, but this was a fact that could not be changed. They could only work harder and increase their cultivation as quickly as possible. Only then would the Sacred Palace possess an unshakable status and authority in the North Star boundary. It did not matter how they attacked the Night Ghost Pavilion. Now that the 5 great sects had joined forces, the outcome was already set in stone. For the Sacred Palace, the most important thing to consider was how much profit the Sacred Palace would get after defeating the Night Ghost Pavilion. This was the most important thing. After all, this would affect the future development of the Sacred Palace. After the short meeting, the Supreme Sovereigns from the Supreme Divinity Sect, Liwang's Sect, 9 Heavens, and Night Ghost Pavilion left the Sacred Palace. Because all parties had already established cross-realm teleportation formations, it was very convenient for them to travel between each other. On the second day after the meeting, the 5 great sects indeed joined forces to declare war on the Night Ghost Pavilion. Once this news was released, it naturally caused a huge commotion in the North Star realm. What a joke! If the 5 great quasi-saint sects joined forces to attack the Night Ghost Pavilion, no matter how strong the Night Ghost Pavilion was, it would be defeated without a doubt. Even the demonic Sky Hall would not be spared. The quasi-saint sects in the North Star realm, who had been living in harmony for many years, finally shed all pretenses. Everyone felt that the Night Ghost Pavilion would not be able to escape this time. After the Sacred Palace and the other 4 quasi-saint sects declared war on the Night Ghost Pavilion, countless people were waiting for the Night Ghost Pavilion's response. In many people's opinion, the Night Ghost Pavilion would give in the face of such a lineup. However, no one had expected the Night Ghost Pavilion to remain silent. It was as if they had chosen to accept the challenge. The demonic Sky Hall's response was even more shocking. After the 5 great sects declared war, the demonic Sky Hall actually said that they were willing to join forces with the Night Ghost Pavilion against the 5 great quasi-saint sections. The demonic Sky Hall actually accepted the challenge. When this news spread, the various races in the North Star realm could not remain calm. At the same time, the supreme sovereigns of the 5 great sects smiled helplessly. In Xiao Sheng's cave dwelling, Dai Pamkara, Bing Lian, and Meng Jia were all present. Looking at the 3 of them, Xiao Sheng smiled bitterly. I should have guessed that the demonic Sky Hall would respond like this. Dai Pamkara nodded in agreement. That's right. The devil race loves to fight. Everyone knows this. It's very difficult to make the devil race bow their heads. The various races in the North Star realm knew that the devil race loved to fight. Under such circumstances, it was clearly impossible to make the demonic Sky Hall bow their heads. Since the demonic Sky Hall had chosen to fight to the death, the 5 great sects had also sent out their troops. This time, it was not like the previous time when they were probing the Night Ghost Pavilion. Previously on the Blood Devil continent, the Sacred Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion had only sent out a little more than 20,000 people to test each other's strength. However, the situation was completely different this time. In this battle, the five great sects' goal was to take down the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Hall in one fell swoop. For this, the five great sects had mobilized all their forces. For example, the Sacred Palace had mobilized all their saint venerables, elders, and deacons. As for their disciples, those with the cultivation base above the Tao Gate realm had to participate in the battle as well. As such, the Sacred Palace had gathered no less than 100,000 people. They boarded hundreds of starships and departed from the Sacred Palace in a grandiose manner toward the Night Ghost Pavilion. Their main target in this battle was still the Night Ghost Pavilion. They did not choose to divide their forces foolishly. Instead, the five great sects gathered all their forces and headed straight for the Night Ghost Pavilion. As for the demonic Sky Hall, if they came to reinforce them, they would be destroyed. If it had not come, they would attack the demonic Sky Hall after dealing with the Night Ghost Pavilion. There was no conspiracy. The five great quasi-saint sect had formed an alliance. In this battle, they were relying on their absolute advantage to crush the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Hall. The hundreds of starships from the Sacred Palace sailed through space. At the same time, the Liwang sect, Supreme Deity sect, Ninth Heaven, and Myriad Beast Valley also sent hundreds of starships into the sky. The experts of the five great sects gathered in the Night Ghost Pavilion's direction. At the same time, the demonic Sky Hall also sent their experts to the Night Ghost Pavilion through the transboundary transportation formation. Clearly, they were planning to have a decisive battle with the Night Ghost Pavilion. The arrival of the demonic Sky Hall's experts boosted the Night Ghost Pavilion's morale slightly. However, the supreme venerables of the two great sects had gathered in the Night Ghost Pavilion's main hall. Among them, there were naturally two people in the lead. They were the Night Ghost Pavilion's #1 Supreme Venerate, Ku Gue, and the demonic Sky Hall's #1 Supreme Venerate, Wan Shan. The two of them sat at the head of the table. Ku Gue looked at Wan Shan and asked, "How is it? Have you sent away your elite disciples?" "I've already sent them away." Hearing that, Wan Shan indifferently replied, "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 1193. Wan Shan and Ku Gue were seated side by side in the great hall of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Wan Shan opened his mouth and replied after hearing Ku Gue's words. Ku Gue laughed faintly when he heard this. His laughter contained a trace of fatigue. "Actually, you shouldn't have interfered in this matter. If the evil Sky Palace hadn't interfered and offered some compensation, I believe Tianju and the others wouldn't have made things difficult for you. After all, the alliance of the five great sects isn't solid." Some blamed Wan Shan for interfering in this matter. Actually, half a month ago, Wan Shan had personally met with Ku Gue and made it clear that the demonic Sky Hall would not betray the Night Ghost Pavilion. It was precisely because of this that Wan Shan had sent the elite disciples of the demonic Sky Hall out of the North Star realm through the horizon's limit, just like the Night Ghost Pavilion. At this moment, Wan Shan's expression changed when he heard Ku Gue's reprimand. He actually said respectfully to Ku Gue, "Uncle, what do you mean? If it wasn't for you, how could I be where I am today? I'm not a coward who's afraid of death. This time, I'll definitely fight to the death with Uncle." Wan Shan actually called Ku Gue Uncle. Hearing this, Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the others were stunned. What did this mean? The dignified #1 Great Sovereign of the Evil Sky Palace actually called Ku Gue Uncle? They naturally didn't know the relationship between Wan Shan and Ku Gue, because even though they were both quasi-saint great sovereigns, Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the others were too young compared to Wan Shan and Ku Gue. If one wanted to talk about the relationship between Wan Shan and Ku Gue, one would have to start from when Ku Gue was young. He couldn't remember how many years it had been. At that time, Ku Gue was just an ordinary disciple of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Ku Gui and Wan Shan's parents met when they went out to train. It should have been very difficult for the Ghost Clan and the Devil Clan to become friends, but nothing was absolute. Ku Gui and Wan Shan's parents became very good friends just like that. Moreover, as time passed, the three of them became life and death friends. They frequently went out to train together and wandered various secret realms in the North Star boundary to improve their cultivation. As they ceaselessly tempered themselves on the brink of life and death, their cultivations improved incessantly. At the same time, their relationship grew deeper and deeper. Unfortunately, a mishap occurred during their tempering. Wan Shan's parents fell into a trap and were unable to escape, whereas Ku Gui's cultivation was merely at the Dao Emperor realm at that time, so he was unable to rescue Wan Shan's parents. In the end, Wan Shan's parents entrusted Wan Shan to Ku Gui. Ku Gui, who managed to escape the calamity, took Wan Shan in and raised him. He even taught Wan Shan how to cultivate. Later on, Wan Shan joined the demonic Sky Palace. Only then did the two of them gradually cut off contact. Because too much time had passed, no one knew about the relationship between the two. At this moment, when he heard Wan Shan call him uncle, a trace of reminiscence flashed in withered Ghost's eyes. Then he sighed softly. How many years has it been? The brat from the past has now become an overlord. I almost forgot. As he spoke, Withered Ghost looked at Wan Shan with a gentle expression. It felt like a father sizing up his child. After a moment of silence, Withered Ghost continued. Remember my words. If you can't win this battle, run and save your life. Uncle. Wan Shan wanted to refute Withered Ghost's words, but this time, Withered Ghost obviously didn't give him a chance. He shouted in a deep voice. This is an order. Withered Ghost wanted Wan Shan to save his life. Seeing Withered Ghost's serious expression, Wan Shan finally nodded silently. However, Wan Shan didn't have the slightest intention of retreating. This time, he must live and die with his uncle. It was completely unexpected that Withered Ghost was like a father to Wan Shan. There was actually such a relationship between the two of them. As the oldest and oldest quasi-sage, supreme venerate in the North Star boundary, Withered Ghost's life was indeed legendary. There were too many memories and too many things that intertwined together to weave Withered Ghost's long life. Withered Ghost naturally knew what Wan Shan was thinking when he nodded in agreement. He sighed silently and then turned to Blood Moon, Great Sovereign, and the others. Go and prepare. After saying that, Withered Ghost disappeared from the main hall. After Withered Ghost left, Wan Shan also left. Blood Moon, Great Sovereign, and the others began to prepare for the battle. Ever since the 5 great sects declared war on the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace stood firmly on the Night Ghost Pavilion's side, the entire North Star boundary was shrouded in an extremely oppressive atmosphere for half a month. After half a month, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the army of the 5 great sects finally arrived at the Dark Night continent. Thousands of huge starships, each at least a few thousand meters long, descended on the Night Ghost Pavilion's Night Ghost continent and flew straight toward the Night Ghost Pavilion. The army of the 5 great sects had arrived. The Night Ghost Pavilion was located in the center of the Night Ghost continent. The buildings of the Night Ghost Pavilion were all black. Looking from afar, rows of black buildings stretched endlessly. However, at this moment, at the highest point of the Night Ghost Pavilion, all the experts of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had gathered in a huge square. At the front of the crowd was Withered Ghost, Wan Shan, and the other great sovereigns of the 2 sections. The great sovereigns were all sitting cross-legged. Their slightly closed eyes suddenly opened at this moment. Blood Moon, Great Sovereign, said in a low voice, "They're here." Sure enough, as soon as she finished speaking, the starships in front of them appeared in everyone's sight. They rapidly approached from the horizon and soon arrived above the Night Ghost Pavilion. 5 great sects. Even if we have to fight to the death, we won't let you off so easily. Wan Shan's eyes flashed coldly as he faced the starships of the 5 great sections. His heart was overflowing with killing intent. Wan Shan's killing intent was rampant. On the other hand, Withered Ghost seemed very calm. He looked indifferently at the starships in the sky. At this moment, voices slowly came to the deck of the 5 starships in the lead. The great sovereigns of the Supreme Deity Sect, Li Wang's Sect, Myriad Beast Valley, 9 Heavens, and Sacred Palace had brought their chosen and saintesses onto the starships. Among them, the Supreme Deity Sect's Jiang Taishan, Li Wang's Sect's Huanggu, Myriad Beast Valley's Lion Sect, 9 Heavens Tianju, and Sacred Palace's Xiao Shang stood at the front of the crowd. However, Withered Ghost automatically ignored Xiao Shang when he looked at the 5 of them. This was because Xiao Shang was only at the initial quasi-saint stage. In Withered Ghost's eyes, he was practically a child. Moreover, in terms of seniority, Withered Ghost could probably be Xiao Shang's great-grandfather. Therefore, Withered Ghost completely ignored Xiao Shang and locked his gaze on Jiang Taishan and the other 3. Jiang Taishan, Huanggu, Lion Sect, Tianju, we haven't seen each other for several decades, Withered Ghost said in a calm voice. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1194. Ku Gui's expression didn't change in the face of the 5 great sects army. He spoke to Jiang Taishan and the others as if he was chatting with an old friend he hadn't seen for many years. Jiang Taishan and the others also smiled when they heard Ku Gui's words, but their smiles were somewhat complicated. Tianju even spoke. Senior Ku Gui, the Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat is irreversible. Surrender. Jiang Taishan and the others were wary of Ku Gui, but they also respected him. After all, Ku Gui was indeed their senior. If Ku Gui was willing to surrender, they wouldn't attack him and would just divide the Night Ghost Pavilion's resources. As for Ku Gui, they would put him under house arrest and let him fend for himself. Ku Gui laughed when he heard Tianju's words, but his laughter was somewhat hoarse. This old man has lived for so many years. I don't want to become someone else's prisoner at the last moment. Forget about surrendering. Let's attack. After living for so long, Ku Gui obviously wouldn't agree to surrender. Jiang Taishan and the others secretly sent voice transmissions. Lion Sect, you deal with Wan Shan. The 3 of us will deal with Ku Gui. With the addition of Wan Shan, they could only send 1 person to restrain Ku Gui. Even so, Jiang Taishan and the others still felt that they had a good chance. After all, Ku Gui hadn't broken through to the Great Saint stage. After a simple communication, Jiang Taishan said, "Since that's the case, let's start the battle. Attack!" As Jiang Taishan's voice fell, the experts of the Supreme Deity Sect, the Power King Sect, the Valley of Beasts, 9th Heaven, and the Sacred Palace all flew off their starships and attacked the Night Ghost Pavilion. As the 5 great sects launched their attack, the experts of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace also rushed out. The 2 sides immediately engaged in a fierce battle. In truth, there wasn't much suspense in this battle. After all, the difference in strength between the 5 great quasi-saint sects and the 2 great quasi-saint sects was very obvious. Whether it was in terms of numbers, overall strength, or the number of saints, the 5 great sects had an overwhelming advantage. Basically, the quasi-saint supreme sovereigns of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had to face at least 2 supreme sovereigns of the 5 great sections. The ratio of supreme sovereigns was close to 3-to-1, not to mention saints and half-saints. The Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace were doomed to lose. As a chosen of the Sacred Palace, Xiao Chun, Tian Yu, Qin Shu, Gu Lingyao, and 100 Flower Fairy. After the group killed several disciples of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Demonic Sky Palace, Tian Yu said to Xiao Chun in confusion, "Husband, this is strange. I don't see any holy son or holy daughter of the Demonic Sky Palace or the Night Ghost Pavilion." Where? One of them was the second chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect, Sharjah, and the other was the third chosen of the supreme divine sect, Kusa'a. The two nodded at Xiao Chun, and Xiao Chun smiled. Then, Xiao Chun looked at Bai Shi. Xiao Chun didn't know much about the first holy son of the supreme divine sect, nor had he seen him before. This was the first time they had met. However, Bai Shi didn't show any hostility toward Xiao Chun. He smiled and spoke gently. Brother Xiao Chun, Tianyu, didn't you see the chosen of the evil sky palace in the night ghost pavilion? Bai Shi asked when he saw Xiao Chun and Tianyu. Tianyu shook her head. Bai Shi frowned slightly. It was strange that the chosen of the evil sky palace and the night ghost pavilion had all disappeared. Could it be that they were sent away? Bai Shi fell silent. Suddenly, Sharjah, who was behind him, said. A strange light flashed through Bai Shi's eyes when he heard Sharjah's words. Sharjah's words reminded him of something. Since they couldn't find the chosen of the evil sky palace and the night ghost pavilion, it was very likely that they had been sent away. The evil sky palace and the night ghost pavilion knew that they had no chance of winning, so they secretly sent their chosen away. They wanted to leave some descendants of their sections. It wasn't impossible. Sharjah's guess was right. Bai Shi wasn't the only one who felt this way. Xiao Chun felt the same way too. Brother Bai Shi, let's not bother about these things for now. Let's finish this battle as soon as possible. Since they couldn't find the chosen of the two sects, they would leave it for now. After the battle, they would mobilize the forces of the 5 great sects to search for the chosen of the 2 sects in the North Star realm. Bai Shi sighed slightly when he heard Xiao Chen's words. Then, he nodded and said, Brother Xiao is right. Let's not bother about these things for now. Let's finish this battle first. After saying that, Bai Shi cupped his hands at Xiao Chun and left with Sharjah and Kusa. At the same time, Xiao Chun, Tianyu, and the other 3 women continued to venture deeper. Along the way, they directly killed the disciples of the 2 sects they encountered. Without the chosen of the evil sky palace and the night ghost pavilion, the disciples of the evil sky palace and the night ghost pavilion were no threat to Xiao Chun and the others. Therefore, under the lead of Xiao Chun and the other chosen of the 5 great sects, the disciples of the night ghost pavilion and the evil sky palace were quickly defeated. The disciples of the 5 great sects also began to chase after them. Since they wanted to kill the evil sky palace in one fell swoop, there was no need to hold back. The disciples' defeat was already set in stone. As for the battle between saints, the night ghost pavilion and the evil sky palace were clearly no match for them. However, at this moment, everyone was more concerned about the battle between the 2 quasi-saint great venerables, especially the number 1 great venerables like Ku Gue. Standing proudly in the sky, the 2 great venerables formed 2 camps. Led by Ku Gue and Wan Shan, the night ghost pavilion and the evil sky palace's side clearly had fewer people. However, at this moment, all of them were unafraid of death. Facing Ku Gue and Wan Shan, the quasi-saint great venerables led by Jiang Taishin and the other 3 didn't relax at all. Tianju said to Ku Gue, who didn't seem to show any signs of fighting, Senior Ku Gue, surrender. Look below. The outcome is already decided. Tianju was right. The outcome of the battle was already very clear. The defeat of the night ghost pavilion and the evil sky palace was only a matter of time. However, Ku Gue smiled and said, he's an old man. He would rather die in battle than surrender. Tianju, there's no need to persuade him anymore. Let's do it. Ku Gue had already made up his mind to fight to the death. Hearing this, Tianju sighed softly. Then, the other great venerables moved. The battle between the quasi-saint great venerables of both sides immediately broke out, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1195. All the great venerables of the 7 quasi-saint sects of the North Star Field were present. As the great venerables made their moves, a monstrous battle broke out. It had been many years since a battle between quasi-saint great venerables had taken place in the North Star Field, especially a battle between dozens of quasi-saint great venerables. Perhaps it had been thousands of years. A battle between quasi-saint great venerables was completely incomparable to a battle between saints. Whether it was in terms of power or destructive power, it was dozens of times more powerful than a saint. Therefore, the quasi-saint great venerables knew very well that their battle could not be carried out here. They could only enter the void. Spatial cracks appeared one after another as the quasi-saint great venerables rushed into the void. There is no doubt that if these quasi-saint great venerables were allowed to battle here, then everyone present would probably die. Just a simple aftershock would be unstoppable by anyone below the saint realm. Of course, if they were to battle here, then the massive Black Knight continent would be completely finished. At that time, it would not be as simple as just creating a loophole like the Blood Demon continent. Instead, it would directly cause the Dark Knight continent to collapse. After killing a disciple of the evil Sky Palace, Shao Chen looked up at the sky where the other Grand Monarchs had been and muttered to himself softly, "It's time for the Grand Monarchs to disappear into the void." How the Great Venerables also started fighting? This battle was almost no pressure for Shao Chen because the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace did not have any holy sons or holy daughters. Therefore, no one could pose any threat to Shao Chen. The disciples of the two sects were bound to lose, so Shao Chen did not continue to attack and let the disciples chase after them. Shao Chen was indeed not interested in these ordinary disciples. Standing in a pavilion, Maid Tianyue accompanied Shao Chen and watched the battle that could be said to have been decided. Shao Chen's eyes were fixed on the place where the great venerables were previously. Seeing Shao Chen's thoughtful look, Gu Lingyao held Shao Chen's hand and said with a smile, "What's wrong, big brother Shao Chen? The battle has already been decided. What's there to worry about?" Upon hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Shao Chen said softly, "We naturally have no problem here, but in the end, it still depends on the great venerables." There were no more surprises in the battle between quasi-saint great venerables, but it was hard to say about the battle between quasi-saint great venerables. This hard to say was Ku Gue. After all, he was known as the oldest quasi-saint great venerables in the North Star domain. No one knew how strong he was because he had not fought for many years. The final battle between quasi-saint great venerables and great venerables that would determine the final outcome. Unfortunately, the Sacred Palace did not seem to have any way to deal with this level of battle because the Sacred Palace did not have a perfect quasi-saint expert. Among the four ancestors of the Sacred Palace, Shao Sheng had the highest cultivation base, but he was only at the initial quasi-saint realm. This kind of strength was clearly not enough to change the outcome of the battle. Therefore, the ones who would really determine the outcome were still Ku Gue, Wan Shan, Jiang Taishen, Tianju, Mangu, and Shirzong. These were the six perfect quasi-saint great venerables. 4 against 2 should have been an absolute advantage, but unfortunately, Ku Gue was not simple. Therefore, it was hard to say. The situation in the outside world had been decided. In the void, the various quasi-saint great venerables had also begun their battle. Shao Sheng, Randing, Bing Lian, and Meng Jie had joined forces to fight Blood Moon of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Although it was 4 against 1, Shao Sheng and the other 3 did not have much of an advantage. They did have an advantage, but it was not very big. It cannot be helped. Blood Moon's cultivation base was at the quasi-saint great venerate level, while Shao Sheng and the other 3 were only at the initial quasi-saint realm. Apart from Shao Sheng, who was at the quasi-saint realm, Shao Chen, the other 3 were only at the initial quasi-saint realm. Their foundation was still too shallow. However, there was nothing they could do. The Sacred Palace could only do its part. Although the 4 of them were not as strong as Blood Moon, it was still very difficult for Blood Moon to fight 1 against 4. Shao Sheng and the other 3 used all kinds of saint-level martial skills, while Blood Moon also repeatedly used the remarkable abilities of the ghost race. The two sides exchanged blows, but neither side gave in. In addition to Shao Sheng and the other 3, terrifying battles were also breaking out in other places. But overall, the 5 great sects still had the upper hand. The number of people had more than doubled, But the real focus was on the battle between Ku Gui, Jiang Taishan, and the other 5 great venerates. They had their own individual battlefield. As existences at the great circle of the quasi-saint realm, they were the top group of quasi-saint great venerates. At this time, Lion Sect was already fighting fiercely with Wan Shan, while Jiang Taishan, Tianju, and Huanggu were also jointly attacking Ku Gui. Lion Sect did not dare to be the slightest bit careless in the battle with Wan Shan. The two could be considered old acquaintances. Although they did not know each other well, they knew each other very well. They knew that each other's strength was not simple, and they could not afford to be the slightest bit distracted in such a battle of life and death. Lion Sect's true form was a golden-winged lion. His bloodline was very strong, comparable to the Flood Dragon clan. He was only slightly weaker than the Dragon clan, Phoenix Huangyi clan, and Qilin clan. Every time Lion Sect attacked, the phantom of a golden lion would appear behind him. At the same time, the sound it made was even more soul-shaking. On the other hand, Wan Shan had already used the Great Demonic Body, the strongest Great Demonic Body of the Devil Clan. However, Wan Shan's Great Demonic Body was very different from the Great Demonic Body Xiao Chun had seen before. His body was covered by a thick layer of demonic qi. This layer of demonic qi seemed to have solidified, forming a suit of armor on the surface of Wan Shan's body. At the same time, the wings on his back were incomparably huge. When they were spread open, they were close to 20 meters long. With the appearance of the black armor and the huge wings, Wan Shan seemed to have grown a lot bigger out of thin air. Compared to Sha Moa's great demonic body, Wan Shan's great demonic body could be said to be the true, complete form. The two fought fiercely, but Wan Shan and Lion Sect did not back down. In the midst of such an intense battle, Lion Sect shouted, "Wan Shan, the Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat is certain. Why do you have to do this? Do you really want the demonic Sky Palace to be buried with the Night Ghost Pavilion? Lion Sect, you despicable scoundrel. How dare you betray us?" Wan Shan shouted angrily when he heard Lion Sect's words. In Wan Shan's opinion, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Palace had fallen to such a state because of the Myriad Beast Valley's betrayal. If the Myriad Beast Valley had not turned to the Sacred Palace's side, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Palace would not have fallen to such a state. Lion Sect's expression did not change when he heard Wan Shan's angry shout. "We're just taking what we need. The Sacred Palace has what the Myriad Beast Valley needs, but the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Palace do not. Besides, aren't we in an alliance for benefits?" Chapter 1196. The Lion Sect did not care about the betrayal that Wan Shan had mentioned. Just as he had said, the alliance was only formed for the sake of benefits. Since the Sacred Palace was able to offer even greater benefits, it was only natural that the Thousand Beast Valley would turn traitor. The killing intent in Wan Shan's eyes grew even stronger when he heard Lion Sect's answer. At the same time, his attacks became even fiercer. Lion Sect sneered as he blocked Wan Shan's attacks. "You want to kill me? But can you do it, Wan Shan?" Wan Shan really wanted to kill Lion Zong now. Unfortunately, both of them were existences in the great perfection of the quasi-sage realm. At their level, it could be said that it was very difficult to kill them. The difficulty of killing a quasi-sage great venerate was probably dozens or even hundreds of times more difficult than killing a saint. At the quasi-saint realm, one's vitality could already be described as terrifying. Therefore, Lion Sect was not afraid of Wan Shan's rage at all. Moreover, Lion Sect's current mission was to delay Wan Shan and wait for Jiang Taishan's trio and Ku Gui's victory to be decided. At that time, Wan Shan would naturally be doomed. The battle between Lion Sect and Wan Shan was intense. However, anyone with discerning eyes could see that although the battle between the two was intense, no one could do anything to the other. Especially Lion Sect. He had no intention of going all out against Wan Shan. This gave Wan Shan a headache. While Lion Sect and Wan Shan fought fiercely, Jiang Taishan, Tianju, and Mangu were also fighting fiercely with Ku Gui. Ku Gui, who was wearing a loose black robe and had a thin and short figure, did not fall into any disadvantage when facing the siege of Jiang Taishan's trio. Jiang Taishan's trio were all existences at the perfect quasi-saint realm and were the strongest great sovereigns of the North Star boundary, along with Ku Gui. Ku Gui did not show any signs of defeat even when facing three existences at the same level as him. From this, it could be seen that Ku Gui's strength was indeed incomparably powerful. He was indeed worthy of the title of the North Star boundary's most ancient and strongest quasi-saint great sovereign. With every movement, Withered Ghost was surrounded by a dense ghostly aura. When he struck out with his palm, the ghostly aura swept toward Jiang Taishan and the other two like a blanket. Fortunately, Jiang Taishan and the other two were strong. Otherwise, if it were any other quasi-sage great sovereign, they would have been killed by the Withered Ghost. Jiang Taishan and the others weren't surprised by Ku Gui's terrifying strength. After all, this was something they had long expected. If it weren't for Ku Gui's strength, why would Jiang Taishan and the others be so afraid of him? The four peerless powerhouses who stood at the top of the North Star boundary, existences who were only one step away from the Great Sage Realm, were engaged in a fierce battle at this moment. All kinds of magical powers emerged one after another, and even the other quasi-sage and great venerables didn't dare to approach the place where the four of them were fighting. After all, the residual power was simply too ferocious, and the slightest carelessness might cause them to be affected. With a palm strike, a ghostly claw condensed from ghostly chi descended from the sky, like a mountain pressing down on Jiang Taishan. Facing the attacks of the Withered Ghosts, Jiang Taishan's expression was calm. Golden light flashed as the God Race's ability was used. The golden light and the ghostly claw fiercely collided, and then both exploded in the air at the same time, slowly dissipating. After successfully blocking the attack of the Withered Ghost, Jiang Taishan said coldly, "Ku Gui, you're old. If you were a few hundred years younger, perhaps the three of us wouldn't be able to do anything to you. But now, you're on the verge of death, and your strength is far from what it was in your prime. I'm afraid you don't have much of a chance today." Jiang Taishan's words were indeed true. The Withered Ghost was old, and after living for so many years, his strength was at the top of the entire North Star boundary. However, no matter how strong he was, it was difficult to resist the erosion of time. Ordinary people would die, saints would die, quasi-sages and great venerables would die, and even great sages couldn't surpass time and resist the erosion of time. It was hard to say whether there was anyone in this world who could truly achieve immortality, but at the very least, no one had ever heard of anyone who could live forever. Time was the most terrifying power in this world. No matter how strong you were, no matter what your cultivation was, time would always be able to crush you alive unknowingly. Take the current Withered Ghost, for example. He had lived for thousands of years, and his cultivation was exceedingly high, but he still couldn't escape time. Now that he was old, his body was far from being as strong as it was in his prime. This was something that the Withered Ghost himself didn't deny. His current body was too weak, and Jiang Taishan and the other two could exhaust him to death. The Withered Ghost already knew this, so he was certain that the Night Ghost Pavilion would lose. Otherwise, if he was at his prime, even if he was alone, he wouldn't be afraid of Jiang Taishan and the other two. Hearing Jiang Taishan's words, the Withered Ghost smiled bitterly. "Yes, old people are indeed useless, but the three of you are a little too arrogant. You have to know that even if you're old enough to lose your teeth, a tiger is still a tiger." He admitted that he was old, but the Withered Ghost also said that the Jiang Taishan trio were too arrogant. Hearing this, Jiang Taishan remained silent, while Tianju's eyes flashed with a trace of seriousness. However, the three of them didn't have to wait. Soon, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from the Withered Ghost's body. This aura had faintly surpassed the quasi-sage level. This was an aura that surpassed the quasi-sage level. This was feeling the terrifying aura that suddenly erupted from the withered ghost's body. The Jiang Taishan trio were stunned, and Tianju couldn't help but murmur. Great Saint Stage? You broke through to the Great Saint Stage? Above the quasi-sage level was the Great Saint Stage. This level was equivalent to a legendary existence in the current North Star boundary. It had been at least tens of thousands of years since a great saint emperor had appeared in the North Star boundary. If the withered ghost really broke through to the Great Saint Stage, then there was no doubt that everyone present would die. The strength of a great saint emperor was absolutely enough to change the color of heaven and earth. Although there were many quasi-sage great venerables in the 5 great sects, in front of a great saint emperor, it was still not enough. This was like the gap between the quasi-sage level and the saint stage. Was it not so great that a quasi-sage great venerate could easily crush a saint stage expert? By the same logic, a great saint emperor could also easily crush a quasi-sage great venerate. Moreover, the gap between the two was even greater than the gap between the quasi-sage level and the saint stage. It was so great that it was unimaginable. Not only Tianju, but Jiang Taishan and Huanggu's expressions also changed drastically. However, in the face of the trio's surprise, the withered ghost chuckled a little self-deprecatingly. The great sage level isn't so easy to break through. Don't worry. This old man hasn't broken through to the great saint stage yet. If I have to say, this old man's true realm should be at the half-step great saint stage. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1197. He hadn't broken through to the great saint realm, but was only one step away from the quasi-saint realm. He could be considered a half-step great saint. At this moment, the withered ghost's originally thin and short figure seemed to have grown infinitely taller. He simply stood there, but at this moment, he was like a huge mountain that stood in front of Jiang Taishan and the other two. Hearing Ku Gui's words, Jiang Taishan and the other two didn't feel the slightest bit happy. On the contrary, their expressions were grave to the extreme. Half-step great saint was an existence that surpassed the quasi-saint realm. All along, Jiang Taishan and the other two had only thought that Ku Gui's cultivation should be at the peak of the quasi-saint realm. Who would have thought that Ku Gui had finally taken that step? Although it was only half a step, it was already shocking enough. Looking at Ku Gui's slightly bitter smile, Tianju sighed silently. Is this the number 1 expert of the North Star realm? Half-step great saint, Ku Gui had occupied the position of the number 1 expert of the North Star realm for thousands of years. In these thousands of years, no matter how turbulent the North Star realm was or how the situation changed, Ku Gui still firmly held the number 1 position in the North Star realm. Perhaps it was because he was already old, but in recent years, Ku Gui had rarely shown himself, let alone fought with others. Perhaps it was because Ku Gui's silence that people gradually forgot how powerful he used to be. Today, Ku Gui, who was already on the verge of death, finally showed his powerful side once again. Facing Jiang Taishan and the other two who were stunned in place, Ku Gui smiled. This should be the last battle of this old man's life. Perhaps it's not bad to end like this. Come, let's do it. Saying that, Ku Gui's right hand slowly reached out, and at the same time, a terrifying aura spread out. This aura was like an invisible hand that instantly grasped Jiang Taishan and the other two. Feeling the appearance of this inexplicable power, Jiang Taishan and the other two didn't hesitate and attacked at the same time. However, Withered Ghost didn't show any reaction. He stretched out his right hand and clenched it. Suddenly, the space where the 4 of them were fighting shattered like a mirror. One must know that this was the void. The space in the void was at least 100 times stronger than the outside world. A quasi-sage great venerable couldn't break the space in the void, but Withered Ghost did it. With just a clench of his fist, cracks appeared in the surrounding space. The void has shattered. Looking at the dense cracks around him, Baron blurted out subconsciously. But before he could react, he felt as though his body was being gripped tightly and couldn't break free for a moment. Not only Huanggu, but Jiang Taishan and Tianju were also doing the same. At this moment, the three of them didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. They all erupted with their strongest power. The mark of the Heavenly Clan appeared on Tianju's forehead. A white light bloomed from the mark and quickly wrapped around Tianju's body. Jiang Taishan's whole body shone with golden light. His whole person seemed to have turned into a golden man. The dazzling light made it impossible for people to open their eyes. There was also Huanggu. At this time, Huanggu's originally huge body grew even bigger. He was originally 5 meters tall, but now he had grown to nearly 20 meters. At the same time, his skin was suffused with a faint green luster. His whole person was like an indestructible boulder. The three of them all brought out their special skills. They underestimated Withered Ghost. They didn't expect Withered Ghost to have broken through the quasi-sage stage and reached the half-step Great Sage stage. As a result, the three of them naturally didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. At the same time, the three of them used all their strength to forcibly break through Withered Ghost's restraint. Withered Ghost didn't seem to be surprised by this. He flipped his palm and pressed it down. At the same time, the ghost claw condensed from endless ghost chi appeared in the void again. However, this time, the ghost claw was many times larger than before. It was almost the size of a continent. Following the suppression of this ghost claw, Jiang Taishan and the others' faces turned gloomy. Tianju was the first to shout, "Let's attack together." It was absolutely impossible to win against Withered Ghost alone. The slightest carelessness could even lead to serious injuries. Therefore, Tianju didn't hesitate and shouted directly. Only when the three of them joined forces could they tangle with Withered Ghost. However, from the current situation, it was still impossible to defeat Withered Ghost. The three of them attacked at the same time, sending out powerful attacks that went straight for the huge ghost claw descending from the sky. The four attacks collided fiercely, and a terrifying aftershock instantly swept through the void. Even the quasi-sage great sovereigns who were fighting fiercely in the distance looked at the place where Withered Ghost and the others were fighting in astonishment. This, as quasi-sage great sovereigns, there were very few things in the world that could surprise them. However, the battle between Withered Ghost and Jiang Taishan and the other two still left them dumbfounded. This was because this was no longer a power that quasi-sage stage could possess. The four attacks collided fiercely. Immediately, the void was broken and a terrifying void storm overflowed. However, at Withered Ghost's, Jiang Taishan's, and the others' realms, the void storm was no longer a threat. Therefore, the four of them didn't move at all. This was a head-on collision. To everyone's surprise, the combined power of Jiang Taishan and the other two was unable to break through the Withered Ghost palm. The gigantic, ghostly claw that was as large as a continent still did not dissipate and continued to rumble towards Jiang Taishan and the other two. Seeing this scene, Jiang Taishan didn't have time to think and immediately shouted, "Again." Saying that, the three of them attacked again. Twice in a row, the three of them joined forces and didn't hold back in the slightest. Only then did they shatter Withered Ghost's palm. It was such a simple palm, but Jiang Taishan and the others found it so difficult to resist. At this time, the three of them were already thinking of retreating. The strength of a half-step great saint was indeed too strong. Although it was only a half-step, it couldn't be compared to a quasi-sage stage. Facing Withered Ghost's absolute strength, Jiang Taishan and the others already had thoughts of retreating. In just one move, the three of them instinctively felt that they might die against Withered Ghost. No one would believe that a great circle quasi-sage stage expert could be killed by someone else. However, it was different now. Withered Ghost should have the ability to kill quasi-sage great sovereigns. He just needed to spend some effort. Jiang Taishan said hesitantly, "It seems that we still underestimated the number one expert of the North Star field. This battle might. Please add, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 1198. It seems that we still underestimated the number one expert of the North Star field. Perhaps this battle, Jiang Taishan said with a hint of respect in his tone and expression. Putting aside everything else, Withered Ghost was a person worthy of respect, even for Jiang Taishan, Huanggu, Tianju, and the Lion Sect. This kind of respect wasn't because Ku Gui's seniority was higher than theirs, but because Ku Gui's life could be said to be miraculous. Who wouldn't respect someone who had such a life? An old tiger was still a tiger. At this moment, Withered Ghost had proven his words with his actions. Jiang Taishan had the idea of retreating temporarily. But before he could speak, Withered Ghost, who originally had the absolute advantage, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This change immediately made Jiang Taishan's words come to an abrupt end. Withered Ghost clearly had the upper hand before, so why did he spit out blood now? Jiang Taishan and the other two looked at Withered Ghost with puzzled expressions. Withered Ghost's face was even paler and did not seem to be faking it. After a moment of observation, Tianju said, "Am I still old?" It was certain that Withered Ghost was not faking it. It was because his body could not withstand the power of a half-step great sage. Withered Ghost was too old, and his body's various functions had deteriorated. His once powerful physical body had long since ceased to exist with the passage of time. If one's cultivation was water, then one's physical body would be the container. Now, Withered Ghost's physical body was like a broken container. Since it was broken, the water inside naturally flowed out. It was true that Withered Ghost had the cultivation of a half-step great sage, but his physical body could no longer withstand the power of a half-step great sage. Normally, it would be fine if he did not fight, but after a fierce battle, Withered Ghost had circulated the demon chi in his body with all his strength, causing the demon chi to go berserk. His physical body could not withstand the power of the demon chi, so it was natural that he was injured. The three who were originally planning to retreat for the time being obviously did not need to do so anymore, because Withered Ghost's strength just now was like a flash in the pan. At this moment, he could no longer erupt with the same power as before. The outcome was already decided. Withered Ghost was old, but facing the imminent victory, Jiang Taishan and the other two did not have the slightest joy. On the contrary, they looked at Withered Ghost with complicated expressions. This old man, the old man in front of him, had stood tall on the North Star boundary for countless years. His glory was once limitless. Relying on him alone, the Night Ghost Pavilion could be said to have suppressed all the heroes in the North Star boundary and firmly sat as the number one quasi-sage sect in the North Star boundary. It could be said that the Night Ghost Pavilion had once ruled over the North Star realm and was the undisputed number one quasi-sage sect in the North Star realm. During that time, people like the Supreme Deity sect and the Myriad Beast Valley had no choice but to lower their heads and retreat when facing the Night Ghost Pavilion. And all of this was brought about by this old man who was on the verge of death. Ku Gui was not the founder of the Night Ghost Pavilion, and it was impossible for him to break through to the Great Saint realm. In terms of cultivation and ultimate height, Ku Gui could not compare to the Great Saint Emperors of the North Star boundary from ancient times. But in modern times, Withered Ghost was worthy of the title of the number one person in the North Star boundary. Although he was not the Great Sage, he was able to turn the tide as a quasi-sage and firmly hold the number one position in the North Star boundary for thousands of years. Although he was not the Great Sage, he had relied on his own strength to bring the Night Ghost Pavilion to unprecedented heights. At the very least, he had once become the North Star boundary's overlord and the number one quasi-sage sect. This glory was the proof of Withered Ghost's legendary life. What people like to talk about the most was that Withered Ghost was not actually from an aristocratic family, but an orphan. Withered Ghost had no parents since birth and had been abandoned by his parents. When he was young, Withered Ghost had been a beggar and had bitterly struggled to survive in the mortal world. He had experienced the fickleness of human nature, the joys and sorrows of the mortal world. A lowly orphan, a lowly ant, had walked step by step to the peak of the North Star boundary, a peak that the 5 people of his generation dared to compete with. Withered Ghost's aura was gradually weakening and becoming chaotic. At this moment, Withered Ghost was like a candle that was about to burn out. Facing Withered Ghost, Jiang Taishin and the other 2 couldn't help but recall their youth. When Jiang Taishin and the others were still young and had yet to become quasi-sage great venerates, Withered Ghost was already the #1 great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion. At that time, Withered Ghost was in the prime of his life and was full of mettle. Under his leadership, the Night Ghost Pavilion had never tasted defeat. With the power of a single sect, he had suppressed the Supreme Divine Sect, Li Wang's sect, Myriad Beast Valley, Ninth Heaven, and the Demonic Sky Palace. Withered Ghost's name alone was enough to make quasi-sage great venerates of the same generation retreat. Withered Ghost's life was glorious and inspirational. He used his entire life to teach everyone in the North Star boundary a truth. If one wanted to become an expert, one didn't have to come from an aristocratic family. Even if one's family background was ordinary, even if one was born as lowly as an ant, as long as one worked hard, as long as one wanted to, as long as one was willing to put in the effort, there would be a day when one could reach a height that no one else could reach. Withered Ghost was like this. He had walked out of the lowest dark abyss and stepped onto the pedestal that was the focus of everyone's attention. Such an old man made people involuntarily respect him. Regardless of whether he was right or wrong, Withered Ghost deserved the respect of everyone in the North Star boundary. Thinking back to the past, if Jiang Taishin and the other 2 made a move now, they could clearly take advantage of the opportunity to severely injure Withered Ghost. Even if they couldn't kill him, they could definitely seriously injure him. However, the 3 of them didn't choose to make a move. They just stood there quietly and watched. At the same time, Wan Shan, who was fighting fiercely with the Lion sect in the distance, forced the Lion sect to retreat as soon as he felt Withered Ghost's aura weaken. He quickly rushed to Withered Ghost's side. As the #1 great venerate of the Demonic Sky Palace, Wan Shan's eyes turned red, and he spoke with a sobbing tone as he felt the increasingly dense aura of death on Withered Ghost's body. Uncle, Wan Shan, who was at the great perfection of the quasi-sage stage, naturally knew Withered Ghost's current situation. It was almost time for him to step into a coffin. However, before Wan Shan could say anything, Withered Ghost waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to say anything. Then, he looked at Jiang Taishin and the other 2 and the Lion sect, who had rushed over, and smiled bitterly. I'm really old. Why? Aren't you going to make a move? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1199. What? You're still not going to attack? Ku Gue said indifferently, but Jiang Taishin and the others still had no intention of attacking. On the contrary, after exchanging a glance, they all cupped their hands and bowed to Ku Gue. Senior, please stop. You know you're going to lose, so why fight to the death? We don't want to attack Senior anymore. We only asked Senior to stop and surrender. If Jiang Taishin and the others wanted to attack Ku Gue now, they definitely had a great chance of killing him here, because Ku Gue's body couldn't withstand any more consumption. If he continued to fight, he would undoubtedly die. Jiang Taishin and the others had no intention of attacking this old man who was undeniably worthy of respect. In any case, the outcome was already decided, and Ku Gue didn't have much time left. As such, they might as well give this legendary old man a dignified ending. But hearing this, Ku Gue replied with a smile. You 4 brats, this old man already expected this result. How could this old man not know his own body? This old man has fought countless battles in his life. When I was young, I fought in the streets to fill my stomach. When I was a little older, I stepped onto the martial path. In order to improve, I fought with cultivators. Later on, I became the holy son of the Night Ghost Pavilion, a great sovereign, and finally the #1 great sovereign. This old man has encountered too many opponents. After fighting for a lifetime, this old man doesn't want to see this old man surrender before he dies. But since the four of you aren't willing to attack, then let this old man do it." Saying that, Ku Gue forcibly circulated the last of his strength to counterattack before he died. Seeing this, the expressions of Jiang Taishin and the others changed slightly, and they all secretly began to be on guard. Although Withered Ghost was on the verge of death, no one would dare to underestimate his counterattack before his death. While guarding against Ku Gue's attack, Tianju asked, "Senior, do you really want to continue?" Everyone knew the current condition of Withered Ghost's body. Even if he could unleash another powerful attack, he would die without a doubt. Ku Gue didn't answer Tianju's question. Wan Shan, who was standing next to Ku Gue, shouted with bloodshot eyes and a hoarse voice, "Uncle, let me do it. I'll destroy these four guys." Wan Shan also didn't want Ku Gue to continue, but Ku Gue said indifferently, "Shan, don't be foolish. Shanzi, don't do anything stupid and don't hold grudges. Just live well. This is my life. No matter how glorious a person's life is, there will be an end. Today is the end of this old man." At first, Wan Shan didn't understand what Ku Gue's words meant, but as soon as he heard these words, he felt a spatial force instantly enveloping him. He was not the only one who was affected. The other quasi-saint, great venerables from the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace were also enveloped by the spatial energy. Originally, they were still in the midst of a fierce battle. However, as soon as the spatial energy appeared, both sides stopped fighting in confusion. Regardless of whether it was the supreme venerables of the Night Ghost Pavilion or the Evil Sky Palace, or the supreme venerables of the five great sects, all of them stopped fighting. They didn't know what the power of space represented, but at this moment, Jiang Taishin and the other three standing in front of Ku Gue changed their expressions. Ancient Desolation even shouted, "Of the two, only the great sage, or at least a half-step great sage, could perform spatial transfer." The most iconic thing about the great sage realm was the ability to control spatial power. Seeing clearly was controlling, not comprehending. Saints and quasi-saints had only comprehended spatial power, and they had only scratched the surface. The only thing they could do was open up a small space or tear space to travel through the void. The great sage had already mastered spatial power. Spatial transfer could be regarded as a teleportation formation. It could teleport people to any place as long as they didn't exceed the distance. They could see that Ku Gue was performing spatial transfer. The great to 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 the great. Clearly, Ku Gue wanted to use the last of his strength to send them away at the last moment. Realizing this, Mangu and Lion's Own wanted to make a move, but they were stopped by Jiang Taishin and Tianju. Tianju sighed and shook his head. "Forget it. Let him do as he pleases." He didn't hesitate to use the last of his strength to send the great to the great to the great to the great. Jiang Taishin and Tianju gave up on stopping him. Ku Gue smiled when he saw the change in Jiang Taishin's and the other three's expressions. Then, the figures of Wan Shan, the Night Ghost Pavilion, and the Evil Sky Palace's great sovereigns began to float. Clearly, the space transmission had begun. Just a second before they were about to be transferred away, Ku Gue's voice sounded in their ears. "Everyone, everything in the world is fated. There is no race in the world that can prosper forever. Although the Evil Sky Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion have perished today, this old man believes that one day, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace will rise again. Everyone, have a safe journey." Wan Shan and the great to the great to the great to the great to be transferred away. In order to send them away, Ku Gue had used up the last of his strength. After spitting out 3 mouthfuls of blood, Ku Gue had reached the end. The light in his eyes gradually faded, but before he died, Ku Gue looked at Jiang Taishin and the others. He even glanced at Xiao Sheng in the distance. His lips curved into a smile as he murmured in a hoarse voice, "You can sing. Let me take the stage. Don't laugh at the romance. Don't laugh at the absurdity of others. I once asked about the Golden Age. I once sang about the rise and fall. The Tao is emotionless. The Tao is emotional. How do you think? Speaking of this, Ku Gue spat out another mouthful of blood. He was already on the verge of death. The scenery in front of him gradually blurred, but at the last moment, Ku Gue said these words. It's time to end. Every era will have its own heroes, and this old man's era has passed. Facing death, Ku Gue calmly chose to face it. Perhaps he also felt that he no longer belonged to this era. After all, the people who were still active in this era, such as Jiang Taishin, Mangu, and Tianju, were all Ku Gue's descendants, not to mention the new generation of saints like Shao Chun. As for those from the same era as Withered Ghost, they were all dead. Only Withered Ghost had remained standing, but now it was time for him to leave. How could a remnant of an era continue to sit in a high position and prevent the younger generation from ascending? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1200. In every era, there would be a group of people who would lead the way, and in this group of people, there would eventually be a hero who would lead the generation. However, with the passing of generations, legends would eventually come to an end. At this moment, in front of Jiang Taishin and the other great sovereigns of the five great sects, Ku Gue, the legend of two generations, had fallen. His eyes were closed, but there was a smile on his face. A legend. Even in death, Ku Gue had never retreated. In the face of battle, Ku Gue looked down on everything. His only defeat was today his death. Jiang Taishin and the other three great sovereigns bowed to Ku Gue's corpse from the bottom of their hearts because of Ku Gue's last words. Will I appear after you finish singing? Tianju couldn't help but sigh. Ku Gue had truly seen through everything. The old would eventually leave the stage, and the new generation would naturally be in charge of the new generation to write their own legends. As Jiang Taishin and the other three great sovereigns thought to themselves, the surrounding great sovereigns of the five great sects, including Shao Sheng and the others, also bowed respectfully to Ku Gue. Then, Tianju took the initiative to step forward and collect Ku Gue's corpse. How could such a legend be left in the wilderness? Tianju wanted to personally bury him. With Ku Gue dead, everything was a foregone conclusion. Although the great sovereigns of the night, Ghost Pavilion, and Evil Sky Palace had escaped, what could a mere 5 people do? There was no need to worry. The battle in the void had ended, and when the great sovereigns once again appeared in the sky above the night Ghost Pavilion, the battle in the outside world had already ended. The experts of the night, Ghost Pavilion, and Evil Sky Palace had either died or surrendered. Moreover, the 5 great sects had already gathered those who had surrendered to watch over them. The battle in the outside world had already ended, and Shao Chun and the other saints and saintesses were now gathered together. Seeing the great sovereigns walk out of the void, the first saint of the Supreme Divine Sect, Bai Shi, smiled. Looks like it's over. Since the great sovereigns of the 5 great sects had appeared, but the great sovereigns of the night, Ghost Pavilion, and Evil Sky Palace had not appeared, it was clear that the result had already been decided. The disciples of the 5 great sects cheered. On the other hand, the disciples of the night, Ghost Pavilion, and the Evil Sky Palace were ashen-faced. Even the Supreme Venerable had been defeated. It seemed like there was nothing they could do. He didn't mention anything about what had happened in the void. Those things were at the level of great venerables. Even the holy sons and holy daughters of the various sects weren't qualified to know about it. He immediately announced the destruction of the night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Palace. At the same time, Jiang Taishin and the other 3 also announced that the cultivators of the night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Palace who had surrendered would be crippled and allowed to leave. The withered ghost might be one of the reasons why he didn't kill these people. However, not killing them didn't mean that he was letting them go. If he destroyed their cultivation, these people would become useless. Even if he let them go, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, after a few decades, these people would become a pile of soil and wouldn't be a threat anymore. Hearing the orders of Jiang Taishin and the other three, the disciples of the Night Ghost Pavilion and Evil Sky Palace were all stunned. The people of the 5 great sects did not hold back and crippled their cultivations one by one. The aftermath of the battle was carried out in an orderly manner. The people of the 5 great sects directly moved into the Night Ghost Pavilion. Now that the battle was over, it was time to distribute the spoils. The distribution of the spoils had nothing to do with the 10,000 Beast Valley. After all, when they first formed the alliance, the 10,000 Beast Valley had already reached an agreement with the Sacred Palace and the other 4 sects that they wouldn't take any resources from the Night Ghost Pavilion or the Demonic Sky Palace. They only wanted a promise from the Sacred Palace. The 4 sects naturally couldn't divide the resources of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Demonic Sky Palace in a short period of time. Before the distribution, they first had to send people to investigate how many resources the 2 sects had. Therefore, the 5 great sects sent a group of people to the Demonic Sky Palace on the same day. A total of 8 quasi-saint great venerables led the group, including the number 1 great venerate of the 10,000 Beast Valley, the Lion Sect. This was to guard against any sudden attacks from Wan Shan and the others. The distribution of the spoils would take some time. During this time, everyone would have to stay in the Night Ghost Pavilion. As the number 1 holy son of the Night Ghost Pavilion, Xiao Chun was naturally assigned a courtyard to stay temporarily. At the same time, the other holy sons of the 5 great sects received the same treatment. 3 days had passed since the end of the battle. The post-battle security was more or less done. The disciples and experts of the 2 great sects had their cultivations crippled and were sent to the most remote place in the North Star world. They were left to fend for themselves. Xiao Chun wasn't worried about the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Demonic Sky Palace's disciples, nor did he pay much attention to them. On this day, Xiao Chun, Qin Shu, the 4 girls, and the other holy sons and holy daughters of the Sacred Palace sat together. The battle was finally over. It was rare for everyone to be able to relax as they drank and chatted. At this moment, Bai took a sip of wine and said in a relaxed manner, "It's finally over. The North Star world should be able to enjoy some peace for a while." "Yes, but we can't relax. There is still a gap in strength between us and the holy sons and holy daughters of the other sections. We have to make up for it as soon as possible. We can't always let senior brother Xiao Chun and the others handle everything. We are also holy sons and holy daughters of the Sacred Palace," said the 9th holy daughter, Yin Chuan. Compared to the holy sons and holy daughters of the other 4 great quasi-sage sects, apart from Xiao Chun, Chun Ling, Long Qing, and Chun Yu, there was indeed a gap in strength between the holy sons and holy daughters of the Sacred Palace. This gap had to be made up for as soon as possible. No one objected to Yun Chuan's words. Only the Azure Emperor said indifferently, "Junior sister Yun is right. However, after this battle, the Sacred Palace should have a secret realm. When that time comes, as long as we have time, I believe that the holy sons of the Sacred Palace won't be inferior to any of the other sections." At the end of the day, the holy sons and holy daughters of the Sacred Palace were weak because of their lack of foundation. It wasn't just their personal foundation that was lacking, but the Sacred Palace's foundation was also lacking because the Sacred Palace had no heritage. If the Sacred Palace's foundation could reach the level of the other quasi-sage sects, the Azure Emperor and the others would definitely be able to catch up with the holy sons and holy daughters of the other sections. In the past, they didn't have this qualification. However, after this battle, the Sacred Palace would definitely have its own secret realm. Everyone was overjoyed when they heard the Azure Emperor's words. A secret realm was what the Sacred Palace needed the most now. However, unlike everyone else, Xiao Chun didn't look too happy. This was because Xiao Chun knew very well that the process of distributing the benefits wouldn't be that simple. They used to have a common enemy. Now that the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had been destroyed, there were no longer any threats. Naturally, there would be conflicts. Unfortunately, the Sacred Palace was now in a weaker position, especially when it came to the quasi-saint supreme venerables. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1201. Originally, the alliance of the 5 great sects was driven by benefits. Previously, there was still the external threat of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace. However, now that the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had been declared dead, there was no external threat. At the same time, there was also the distribution of benefits. This matter would not be simple. Birds die in pursuit of food, and men die in pursuit of wealth. Therefore, it was not certain whether the Sacred Palace will be able to obtain a relatively fair share of benefits this time. After all, there was indeed a huge gap between the Sacred Palace and the other 4 great sects at the quasi-saint level. Jiang Taishan, Tianju, Mangu, and Shizong were all existences at the great circle of the quasi-saint stage. On the other hand, the strongest person in the Sacred Palace, Shaosheng, was only at the initial quasi-saint stage. If their strength was not equal, they would naturally be bullied. Xiao Chun was not optimistic about the distribution of benefits this time, but it was not as if there was no solution, and this solution naturally lay with Tian Yu and Long Qing. One of them was the number 1 holy girl of the 9 heavens, while the other was a pure-blooded dragon. For the 9 heavens and the 1,000 Beast Valley, Tian Yu and Long Qing's words could not be ignored. Therefore, if they could reach some kind of agreement with the 2 holy girls and the 1,000 Beast Valley, with the help of these 2 great sects, the Sacred Palace would not suffer too much in the distribution of benefits. However, the 1,000 Beast Valley would be fine. After all, they would not participate in the distribution of benefits between the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace. In addition, with Long Qing's persuasion, the 1,000 Beast Valley would very likely agree, but the same could not be said for the 9 heavens. The reason was very simple. The 9 heavens also had to consider their own benefits. If the Sacred Palace got a bigger share, the 9 heavens would naturally get less benefits. After all, there was only so much of the pie. The 9 heavens might be a little difficult to deal with, but it was not impossible. Everything still depended on Tian Yu's status in the hearts of the 9 heavens supreme sovereigns. If Tian Yu's status was high enough, the 9 heavens supreme sovereigns might consider giving up a portion of the benefits to the Sacred Palace. However, Xiaochen obviously wouldn't say these words out loud. He could only take some time to discuss it with Tian Yue and Long Qing. At the same time, he also had to tell Xiao Sheng and the other 3 about his thoughts. Everyone was discussing the division of benefits. At the same time, they all felt that there shouldn't be any major battles in the North Star realm for a long time. They should be able to maintain peace for a period of time. However, no one had expected that such peace would not last long. Of course, this was no longer something that they could control. Even Jiang Taishan, who was at the great perfection of the quasi-saint realm, could not control it because such chaos did not originate from within the North Star domain. While everyone was chatting and drinking far away from the North Star realm, on an incomparably huge continent. In terms of size, this continent was at least 5 or 6 times larger than the entire North Star realm. A continent that was 5 or 6 times larger than the entire North Star realm. What kind of concept was this? One must know that the North Star realm's surface area included the endless starry sky. The total surface area of the various continents of the North Star realm was probably not even 1/10 of the total surface area of the North Star realm. However, even so, the surface area of this continent was still 5 to 6 times the total area of the North Star boundary. One could imagine just how big this continent was. It was simply so big that it made one's hair stand on end. At the same time, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on this continent was also extremely dense. It was practically comparable to some low-level cultivation secret realms. At this time, in a mountain range on this continent, a group of youths had gathered by a vast lake. If Xiaoqin was here, he would definitely recognize these people. These people were the elite disciples of the Night Ghost Pavilion, and Mo Xie was among them. They had escaped from the North Star Realm's horizon and experienced countless dangers along the way before finally arriving on this continent. Many people had died along the way, including 3 chosen. Now, of the 6 chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion, only Mo, Xie, Hao Zong, and Gu Chang'e were still alive. As for the other disciples, nearly 80% of them had died. Nearly 1,000 people had passed through the horizon together, but now, less than 100 people had safely arrived on this continent. Mo Xie's eyes were overflowing with killing intent as he looked at the Night Ghost Pavilion's less than 100 disciples before him. Shao Chun, Sacred Palace, just you wait. One day, I will slaughter my way back to the North Star Realm and make you all regret this. Mo Xie was still thinking about slaughtering his way back to the North Star Realm, but this wish of his was destined to never come true. At the center of this continent, on a towering mountain peak that pierced through the clouds, there was a large hall at the top of the mountain. This hall looked like it had just been built, and dozens of figures were currently sitting cross-legged in the hall. The owners of these figures came from different clans. There were humans, beasts, ghosts, deities, barbarians, and even many other clans that did not exist in the North Star Realm. It was already shocking that so many powerhouses from different clans had gathered in one place. However, what was even more shocking was that the dozens of figures in this hall were all Great Sage Realm cultivations without exception. Dozens of the Great Sage were almost legendary existences in the North Star Realm. At this moment, there were dozens of them gathered in this small hall. The hall was a little dim. At this moment, the Great Sage of the Sacred Clan said faintly, "There has been a lot of activity recently. It seems that the prophecy is really about to come true. After being together for a long time, they will part, and after being apart for a long time, they will come back together." It seems like that is indeed the case. A great saint from the Ghost Clan said softly when he heard that. If this day comes, it will be chaos. I'm afraid the Central World will experience another great purge. This is very normal, and we can't stop it. I think we can start preparing. This is the will of the heavens, and no one can defy it. Moreover, this may not be a bad thing for 100 clans. That's right. Anyway, we have been fighting for so many years. It's meaningless to fight on a small scale. Since the will of the heavens wants the 100-clan war to break out, then let's leave it to fate. I wonder who will become the king of the 100 clans this time. The dozens of the Great Sage spoke one after another. No one knew what they were talking about, but from their words, this continent seemed to be called the Central World. Moreover, something big was about to happen, and it could not be stopped. North Star Realm, South Star Realm, East Star Realm, West Star Realm, 4 Great Star Realms, plus the Central World. It seems that this is really interesting. After some discussion, the Great Sage of the Human Clan chuckled softly. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. Chapter 1202. The Great Sage's words were incomprehensible to outsiders, but the North Star Boundary, South Star Boundary, East Star Boundary, West Star Boundary, and the Central World that the human race Great Sage mentioned at the end made some guesses. But even if he had guessed this, he was still confused. But no matter what, this continent that was 5 or 6 times larger than the entire North Star Realm, which was also the so-called Central World, was indeed ridiculously strong. The Great Sage, who was already known as a legend in the North Star Boundary, was actually gathered in a small hall here. What kind of concept was this? It should be known that any one of the dozens of the Great Sage present was enough to destroy the North Star Boundary. Even if all the quasi-sage great sovereigns in the North Star Boundary joined forces, they would still not be a match for one the Great Sage. Not to mention that there were even more half-step Great Saints and quasi-sage great sovereigns under the Great Sage. This was simply terrifying to the extreme. Of course, Shao Chun and the others knew nothing about the Central World, let alone the unstoppable thing that the Great Sage was talking about in the so-called 100-Race War. At this time, Shao Chun and the others were still staying in the Night Ghost Pavilion. Half a month had passed since the battle. During this time, The various industries and resources under the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had been accounted for one by one. Now, it was time to divide the benefits. Because he had long expected that the division of benefits this time would not be very smooth, Xiao Chun had already told Xiao Sheng and the others his thoughts during this period. Xiao Sheng and the others naturally agreed with this. Therefore, Long Qing and Tian Yu went to visit the quasi-sage great sovereigns of the Valley of Beasts and Ninth Heaven respectively. Just as Xiao Chun had expected, the Valley of Beasts agreed to help the Sacred Palace without much effort, allowing the Sacred Palace to obtain a relatively equal division of benefits. It was not strange for the Myriad Beast Valley to be so straightforward. After all, the Myriad Beast Valley did not participate in the distribution of benefits between the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace. Therefore, the Myriad Beast Valley did not care who received more and who received less. In addition, Long Qing had personally visited them and made some other promises. Naturally, the One Beast Valley was willing to help. After all, there was no loss for the One Beast Valley. The 10,000 Beast Valley agreed, but just the 10,000 Beast Valley alone wasn't enough. They still needed to see what Nine Heavens wanted. Compared to the Myriad Beast Valley, Nine Heavens was a bit more difficult to deal with. Even if Tian Yu personally asked, Tian Ju and the other two great sovereigns of Nine Heavens didn't immediately agree. The reason was very simple. The Sacred Palace wanted a bigger share of the benefits. As a result, Nine Heavens' interests would naturally be infringed. Although it wasn't much, it wasn't something Nine Heavens was happy to see. Nine Heavens was hesitant. In the end, Xiao Chun and Tian Yu visited them together. After an entire day of discussion, Nine Heavens finally agreed. They reached an agreement with Nine Heavens. Nine Heavens and the Myriad Beast Valley would help the Sacred Palace obtain at least 2 secret zones. However, Nine Heavens had a condition. For the next 100 years, the Sacred Palace had to unconditionally give Nine Heavens 3 spots to cultivate in these secret zones every year. To put it bluntly, Nine Heavens would help the Sacred Palace obtain at least 2 secret zones. However, these secret zones would be shared by both the Sacred Palace and Nine Heavens for the next 100 years. Nine Heavens would have 3 spots every year. The Sacred Palace did not refuse Nine Heavens' request. It wasn't that they didn't want to refuse, but that they couldn't. After successfully persuading Nine Heavens and the Myriad Beast Valley, the members of the 5 great sects finally gathered to discuss the division of benefits between the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall. Xiao Chun naturally didn't have the qualifications to participate in a meeting of this level. However, Xiao Chun wasn't too worried about the outcome because he had already made sufficient preparations. With Nine Heavens and the Myriad Beast Valley's help, he believed the Supreme Divine Sect and Li Wang's sect would know what to choose. Xiao Chun leaned lazily on a bamboo chair in the courtyard with Tian Yu by his side. Seeing how calm Xiao Chun was, Gu Lingyao asked curiously, "Husband, aren't you worried at all when the 5 great sects' great sovereigns are discussing the division of benefits today? What's there to worry about? I've already done what I can. All that's left is to wait for the results." Xiao Chun chuckled softly. Xiao Chun had already done what he could, and the rest was not something he should worry about. While Xiao Chun was acting nonchalant, the great sovereigns of the 5 great sects had already gathered in the main hall of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Of course, the leaders were still Jiang Taishan, Tianju, Huanggu, and Lion Sect. The 4 of them sat at the head of the table, while the other great sovereigns sat on the sides below. Although they were the 5 great sects, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 from the Sacred Palace were not on the same level as Jiang Taishan and the other 3. There were no Sacred Palace seats on the head of the table, which was a clear indication of the Sacred Palace's weakness. At the same time, Jiang Taishan was the first to speak. He first glanced at Lion Sect and smiled. "Lion Sect, I thought you wouldn't come." After all, the Myriad Beast Valley doesn't seem to be interested in the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall. Lion Sect didn't need to come at all. After all, the division of benefits this time had nothing to do with the Myriad Beast Valley. Lion Sect smiled faintly when he heard Jiang Taishan's words. I'm just here to join the fun. Lion Sect was only here to join the fun, so Jiang Taishan didn't say anything else. He turned his gaze to the great sovereigns below. Jiang Taishan said indifferently, "After half a month of inventory, we found out the properties and resources of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall. There are 4 foundation secret realms, 18 secret realms for cultivation, 180 spirit veins, 8 of which are supreme-grade spirit veins. As for the pills, talismans, and other things, I won't go into detail. There are a lot of them. Let's discuss the distribution of these things now," Jiang Taishan said calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, a great sovereign from the Liwang sect stood up and said, "Let's make things clear first. Before the distribution, I think we should make things clear first. This time, the distribution should be based on how much effort you put in. Only then will it be fair. Otherwise, it will be unfair to everyone. Distribute according to how much effort you put in." Everyone looked at Xiao Sheng and the other 3. These words were clearly directed at the Sacred Palace. After all, there was no one in the Sacred Palace who was at the great perfection of the Quasi-Saint realm. Moreover, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 were the weakest in the Quasi-Saint realm. Only Xiao Sheng was at the lesser completion of the Quasi-Saint realm, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1203. It was precisely because the Sacred Palace didn't have the slightest advantage at the level of Quasi-Saint Great Venerates that they were so passive in today's meeting that was completely composed of Quasi-Saint Great Venerates. In fact, they had been overshadowed the moment they arrived. According to the Great Sovereign, the Sacred Palace should have contributed the least, so the Sacred Palace should have received the least benefits. That's right. Those who put in more effort should get a bigger share. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair. The other supreme sovereign chimed in. "I also agree." A third great sovereign chimed in. One after another, quasi-saint great sovereigns chimed in. Of course, these people were all from the Supreme Deity sect and Liwang sect. 9 heavens and the myriad Beast Valley had already reached an agreement with the Sacred Palace, so they naturally wouldn't add insult to injury. In the face of these great sovereigns' insistence on fairness, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 remained calm and composed. Their faces didn't change in the slightest, nor did they refute, as if none of this had anything to do with them. Seeing that Xiao Sheng and the other 3 had no intention of speaking, the great sovereign's eyes flashed with confusion. What was the Sacred Palace great sovereign doing? Could it be that they didn't understand the meaning behind his words? Xiao Sheng and the other 3 remained silent. In the end, the first great sovereign to speak looked directly at Xiao Sheng. "Brother Xiao Sheng, does the Sacred Palace think we're right?" Since Xiao Sheng and the other 3 remained silent, they had no choice but to make things clear. Xiao Sheng looked indifferently at the great sovereign and said calmly, "What does it mean to contribute the most? And what does it mean to contribute the least? This naturally depends on the strength of each side. The stronger side will naturally contribute more, and the weaker side will naturally contribute less." The great sovereign chuckled. It was obvious that the Sacred Palace was the weakest among the 5 great sects, especially in the quasi-saint Great Venerate realm. Xiao Sheng smiled when he heard this. "In that case, does everyone think that my Sacred Palace contributed the least in this battle?" Since they had already come to this point, there was no harm in getting straight to the point. Therefore, Xiao Sheng did not beat around the bush and spoke very directly. Xiao Chun asked straightforwardly. Upon hearing this, the Supreme Venerate replied with a smile on his face. "I don't think there's a need for me to say this. Everyone present should have seen that the Sacred Palace has indeed contributed the least in this battle. After all, your Sacred Palace did not contribute at all to Ku Gue and Wan Shan. However, since we are allies, we will naturally not treat the Sacred Palace unfairly. I believe that the benefits that should be given to the Sacred Palace will not be small. What do you say, Brother Xiao Sheng?" The meaning was very clear. Xiao Sheng said indifferently, "In that case, let's see what the 4 great sovereigns think." I believe that the four great sovereigns will be very fair. Xiao Sheng could not be bothered to waste his breath on this person. Since he was already prepared, he would directly throw the matter to Jiang Taishan and the other three. Moreover, when he said this, Xiao Sheng deliberately included the lion sect. The myriad Beast Valley originally did not want to participate in the distribution of benefits this time. Now that Xiao Sheng had said this, it was obvious that the lion sect was also included and the four of them would decide. Unaware of the hidden meaning in Xiao Sheng's words, the great sovereigns present all looked towards Jiang Taishan and the other three. Xiao Sheng was right. Although the distribution of benefits this time seemed to be decided by the great sovereigns present, in reality, only Jiang Taishan and the other three had the right to decide. It was also because of this that the Sacred Palace was in such a passive position. The Sacred Palace did not have people at the level of Jiang Taishan, so they naturally did not have the right to speak and could only follow the arrangements of others. As expected, Jiang Taishan calmly said under everyone's gazes, "Everyone is right and very reasonable. However, I feel that since we are all allies, we should advance and retreat together." Although the Sacred Palace did not contribute much in this battle, they have worked hard even if they did not contribute much. Therefore, the benefits that should be divided will not be small. Jiang Taishan paused as his gaze fell on Xiao Sheng and the other three. After pausing for a moment, Jiang Taishan continued. "How about this? The Sacred Palace will get 1 supreme-grade spirit vein and 10 mid-grade spirit veins from the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall. As for the pills and talismans, they will all be given to the Sacred Palace. After all, we are all allies, and there are some things that do not need to be so clearly divided." Xiao Sheng, Randang, Bing Lian, and Meng Jia's eyes flashed with anger when they heard Jiang Taishan's words. As for the great sovereigns of the Supreme Deity sect and Li Wang's sect, they all cupped their hands together and said, "We agree with the great sovereign's benevolence." The great sovereigns all agreed with Jiang Taishan's words. Moreover, from their expressions, they seemed to think that Jiang Taishan was being very benevolent and that the Sacred Palace was benefiting greatly. However, even Ming Yin could tell that Jiang Taishan's allocation was blatant bullying. He had directly skipped the distribution of benefits for the other three great sects and directly decided on the Sacred Palace's share. Moreover, from beginning to end, Jiang Taishan had not mentioned a single secret realm or secret cultivation area. In other words, the various industries and cultivation resources of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall could not be obtained by the Sacred Palace, let alone secret realms. They did not even have a single secret cultivation area. The Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall had a total of 4 secret realms and 18 secret cultivation areas. However, these did not seem to have anything to do with the Sacred Palace. As for the so-called supreme-grade spirit veins, pills, and talismans, they were not of much use at all. It seemed very generous of him to give all the pills and talismans of the 2 great sects to the Sacred Palace, but everyone present knew that these things were of little value. This was because pills and talismans could be refined by oneself, but secret realms and secret cultivation areas were the foundation of a sect's development. Without secret realms and secret cultivation areas, a sect could not develop at all. Relying on pills and talismans alone, that was simply a fool's dream. They had originally thought that no matter how greedy Jiang Taishan and the others were, they wouldn't give any secret zones to the Sacred Palace, but they should at least have cultivation secret zones. Who would have thought that Jiang Taishan wouldn't even give any secret zones to the Sacred Palace, as if the Sacred Palace couldn't do anything about it? It was no wonder that Xiao Sheng and the others were furious. After working so hard for so long, they did not even get to eat the scraps and only drank the soup. Anyone would be furious if they were in Jiang Taishan's shoes. Therefore, Randang also said in a low voice, "Isn't the great sovereign's actions a little too much? Please add, please vote, please recommend." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.